My parents told me my job would bring shame to my father's 65th birthday. "Do not come tonight," my mother said. "Your hospital badge would embarrass your father in front of your brother's new family." So I stayed away. I let them raise their glasses to the son they called successful, completely erasing the daughter who had quietly sacrificed everything to pay my father's medical bills. But right before they cut the cake, my brother's perfect fiancée called me from the ballroom. She was crying, she was terrified, and she was begging for the one thing only I could do. Before I tell you what happened when I crashed that high society party in my hospital scrubs, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy stories about justice and standing up for yourself. Drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from right now and what time it is there. I love connecting with you all. Now let me take you to the moment my family decided I was no longer good enough to sit at their table. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I am 29 years old and I am the head nurse of the emergency department at a major hospital in Chicago. I had just finished a brutal 12-hour shift. My feet ached, my shoulders were tight with tension, but I was smiling. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, still wearing my faded blue scrubs. My stethoscope hung around my neck, and my ID badge was clipped to my pocket. I looked exhausted, but I was so incredibly happy. Tonight was my father's 65th birthday party. It was also the night my older brother Liam was officially introducing his fiancée Chloe Sterling to our extended family. The Sterlings were old money. They had generational wealth country club memberships, and the kind of influence my mother Patricia had worshipped her entire life. For weeks, my mother had been planning this party at a luxury hotel downtown, determined to prove that the Jenkins family belonged in the same social stratosphere. I had spent 2 months saving up for a dress. It was a deep emerald silk gown hanging right there on the back of my closet door. I had even arranged for a fellow nurse to cover my night shift so I could celebrate with my parents. I was so proud of my dad for making it to 65. 4 years ago, he suffered a massive heart attack, and we almost lost him. I was the one who pulled the extra shifts. I was the one who sold my reliable car and took the bus to work. I was the one who quietly walked into the hospital billing department and paid off $120,000 in medical debt so my parents would not lose their house. Liam did not pay a single dime. He was a self-proclaimed finance guru who always wore tailored suits, but miraculously never had any liquid cash when the family needed it. But I never complained. I loved my father, and I was just grateful he was alive to celebrate tonight. I reached for the zipper of my scrubs, ready to step into the shower and wash away the hospital smell when my cell phone rang. The screen flashed with my mother's name. I swiped to answer and put it on speaker, expecting her to ask me to pick up ice or champagne on my way to the hotel. "Hi, Mom," I said cheerfully. "I am just getting ready. I should be at the venue in about an hour." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. It was not the frantic, busy silence of a woman setting up a party. It was cold. It was calculated. "Sarah," my mother said. Her voice was icy, completely devoid of any warmth or excitement. "I am calling to tell you that there has been a change of plans. You cannot come tonight." I froze. My hand dropped from the zipper of my scrubs. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my tired eyes wide with confusion. "What do you mean I cannot come?" Did the venue change? Did something happen to Dad? "Your father is fine," she snapped sharply. "The venue is the same. The party is happening. But you are not attending. I need you to stay home." The air in my bedroom suddenly felt very thin. I could hear the faint sound of traffic outside my window, but everything else had gone completely still. "Mom, I do not understand. It is Dad's 65th birthday. I took the night off. I bought a dress. Why can I not come to my own father's birthday party?" My mother let out a long, heavy sigh. It was the sound she always made when she felt I was being difficult. "Listen to me carefully, Sarah," she said, her tone dropping into a harsh, hushed whisper. "Chloe's parents are here. The Sterlings are important people. They are influential. Liam has been working very hard to make sure they respect our family. He told them that you are the chief executive officer of the hospital." I blinked, trying to process the words. He told them what? Why would he say that? "Because being an executive sounds respectable," my mother hissed. "Liam is marrying into a wealthy family. He cannot have his future in-laws thinking his sister is just some floor nurse who wipes down stretchers for a living. If you show up looking like you always do, exhausted, wearing that cheap hospital badge, you are going to expose his story. You will completely embarrass your father and ruin your brother's image. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Just some floor nurse. I was the head nurse of the emergency department. I managed a team of 30 people. I saved lives with my bare hands every single day. I was proud of my job. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of shock and rising anger. "I am a registered nurse. There is absolutely no shame in what I do. And Liam had no right to lie about my career to make himself look better." "Oh, stop being so dramatic," my mother shot back. "It is just a small exaggeration to smooth things over. But now we are in a tight spot. If you walk into that ballroom tonight, they will ask you about the hospital administration. They will ask you about profit margins and corporate boards. You will stumble. They will figure out the truth, and the Sterlings will look down on us." Oh, I gripped the edge of my dresser. The sheer audacity of her demand was suffocating. I thought about the $120,000 I had paid to save the man whose birthday they were currently celebrating. I thought about the countless nights I had skipped meals just to make the payments on time. "So you are banning me from Dad's party," I whispered, the reality finally sinking in. "You are uninviting me to protect Liam's fragile ego." "I am protecting this family," she corrected firmly. "Liam is finally securing his future. He is marrying a wonderful, wealthy girl. This could elevate all of us. I will not let you ruin this night just because you want to show off your little green dress. Be a team player for once in your life, Sarah. Stay home." "Does Dad know about this?" I asked, my throat tight. "Does Dad know you are telling me not to come to his milestone birthday?" "Your father agrees with me," she said quickly. Too quickly. "He wants tonight to be perfect for Liam. He knows you will understand. We will bring you a slice of cake tomorrow. Just stay away from the hotel tonight. Do not call, do not text, and absolutely do not show up." She hung up. She did not even wait for my response. She did not give me a chance to tell her I had already arranged my schedule, or that I had bought a gift, or that my heart was currently breaking into pieces. The dial tone echoed loudly in my quiet bedroom. I stood there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman who had given everything to her family, only to be hidden away like a dirty secret. My mother's words echoed in my head. "Be a team player for once. Just some floor nurse. Embarrass your father." I walked over to my closet. The emerald silk gown hung there, catching the light from the window. It was the most expensive thing I owned. I had imagined walking into the ballroom tonight, seeing my dad smile, taking family photos. Instead, I was being erased. I reached out and gently touched the smooth fabric. Then slowly, numbly, I took the dress off the hook and laid it flat in the back of my closet. I shut the door. I sank onto the edge of my bed, still wearing my scrubs. I looked down at my hands. They were dry and calloused from constant washing and sanitizing. These hands had performed chest compressions on strangers. These hands had held the hands of dying patients. These hands had signed the checks that kept my father alive. And my family was ashamed of them. The betrayal was a physical ache in my chest. It was not just about the party. It was the sudden, brutal clarity of my position in the Jenkins family hierarchy. Liam was the golden child, the one allowed to invent a fake glamorous reality. I was the workhorse expected to carry the heavy burdens in the dark and disappear when the stage lights turned on. I could have fought back. I could have driven to the hotel, marched into that ballroom, and caused a massive scene. I could have exposed Liam's lies right then and there. But I was so tired. The 12-hour shift had drained my body, and my mother's phone call had completely drained my soul. I decided I would not fight. I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would stay out of their perfect, upper-class illusion. I untied my shoes and let them drop to the floor. I took off my hospital badge and placed it on the nightstand. I lay down on my bed, staring up at the ceiling, trying to focus on the rhythmic sound of my own breathing, instead of the sting of tears in my eyes. I told myself I was done. I would let them have their fake life, and I would keep my real one. I tried to imagine what was happening at the hotel. I pictured the crystal chandeliers, the clinking of expensive glasses, my brother Liam flashing his charismatic empty smile at Chloe's parents. I imagined my father sitting at the head of the table cutting his cake, looking around the room, and accepting the fact that his daughter was not there. Did he really agree with my mother? Did he really think my presence would ruin his night? That thought hurt more than anything else. I closed my eyes, willing myself to fall asleep. I wanted this night to be over. I wanted to wake up tomorrow and figure out how to navigate a life where I no longer spoke to my parents. I was completely resolved to cut them off. If they were ashamed of me, they would never have to see me again. They would never get another dime of my money, another hour of my time, or another ounce of my love. I was done, but the universe had a different plan. The universe was not going to let Liam get away with his lies, and it was not going to let my parents enjoy their picture-perfect evening. Just as I was drifting into an exhausted sleep, my cell phone began to ring. The bright screen illuminated the dark room. I let it ring, assuming it was my mother calling to make sure I had not left my apartment. But the ringing stopped, and then immediately started again. Someone was desperate. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and grabbed the phone. The screen displayed an unknown number. I swiped to answer and held the phone to my ear. "Hello," I said, my voice thick with fatigue. For a brief second, I heard nothing but sheer chaos. There were people screaming in the background. I heard the unmistakable sound of glass shattering chairs, scraping violently against a hardwood floor, and a loud, panicked commotion. Then a woman's voice broke through the noise. She was crying hysterically, gasping for breath, her words rushed and frantic. "Seok," she sobbed. "Sarah, is this Sarah Jenkins?" All my nursing instincts snapped to attention. The exhaustion vanished from my body in an instant. "Yes, this is Sarah. Who is calling?" "It is Chloe." The woman cried, her voice trembling with terror. "It is Chloe Sterling, Liam's fiancée. Sarah, you have to get here right now. Please, you have to come to the hotel. It is your father." He collapsed. He is not breathing. "Liam ran away and nobody knows what to do. Please, Sarah, you have to save him." To truly understand the depth of the betrayal I felt sitting alone in my bedroom tonight, you have to understand exactly what it cost me to keep my father alive 4 years ago. You have to understand how the very heart beating inside his chest today, the heart they are celebrating at that luxurious downtown hotel, was bought and paid for with my sweat, my sleep, and my absolute sacrifice. It all started on a rainy Tuesday evening in November. I was in the middle of my shift at the hospital when the double doors of the emergency room burst open. The paramedics were rushing a stretcher in, shouting out vitals and medical jargon that I knew better than anyone. Patient is a 61-year-old male, massive myocardial infarction, blood pressure dropping. I stepped forward to assist, just as I had done 1,000 times before. But then I looked down at the pale, sweating face on the stretcher. It was my father. Seeing your own parent on a hospital stretcher strips away every ounce of medical training you possess. In that moment, I was not the head nurse. I was just a terrified daughter. We stabilized him and rushed him up to the cardiovascular intensive care unit. The surgeon, a brilliant specialist who happened to be on call, told us that my father needed an immediate complex quadruple bypass surgery. But there was a catch. Due to a recent change in my parents' health insurance plan, the specific procedure, the surgical team, and the extended intensive care stay were largely out of network. The hospital financial counselor brought us the estimated bill the next morning. It was $120,000. My mother collapsed into a waiting room chair, weeping loudly, clutching the financial printout like it was a death sentence. "We do not have that kind of money," she sobbed. "We will have to remortgage the house. We will lose everything." That is when Liam arrived. My brother walked into the intensive care waiting room wearing a bespoke Italian suit, a Rolex gleaming on his wrist, and carrying a cup of artisanal coffee. Liam was a self-proclaimed finance bro who made his living trading cryptocurrency and flipping digital assets. He was always talking about his portfolio, his investments, and his aggressive wealth-building strategies. Whenever he visited my parents, he parked his brand-new Porsche in their driveway, making sure the neighbors saw it. "Liam," my mother cried out, rushing over to grab his arm. "Thank God you are here. Your father needs surgery, but the bill is $120,000. We do not know what to do." You have to help us." I watched Liam carefully. I saw the way his eyes darted toward the exit, the way his jaw tightened. He set his coffee down and let out a heavy theatrical sigh, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Mom, you know I would do anything for Dad," Liam said, his voice dropping into a smooth, practiced tone of regret. "But the crypto market just took a massive dive this week. It is a crypto winter. All my capital is tied up in long-term digital assets. If I pull my money out now, I will take a catastrophic loss. I am completely illiquid. I just do not have the cash on hand." I stared at him. He was wearing a watch that cost more than a down payment on a house. Yet he was standing outside our father's hospital room, claiming he was too broke to save his life. "It is okay, Liam," my mother said immediately. She actually reached out and patted his arm, comforting him. "I know you work so hard building your empire. We cannot expect you to ruin your financial future. We will just figure something else out. Maybe the bank will give us a loan against the house." I could not listen to it anymore. I looked at my mother, who was already preparing to sacrifice the only home she and my dad had ever owned. And then I looked at my brother, who was checking a text message on his phone. In that moment, I made a choice that would dictate the next 4 years of my life. "Do not call the bank, Mom," I said quietly. "I will handle it." My mother looked at me, her brow furrowed in doubt. How are you going to handle it, Sarah? You are just a nurse." "I will handle it." I repeated, my voice leaving no room for argument. "Just focus on Dad." I did not have $120,000 sitting in a bank account. I was a young nurse paying off my own student loans. But I had excellent credit, a grueling work ethic, and something my brother clearly lacked: a sense of duty. I marched down to the hospital billing department and signed a legally binding payment plan. I took on the debt entirely in my own name. To make those massive monthly payments, I completely abandoned any semblance of a personal life. I went to my nursing director and begged for every available overtime shift. I worked nights, weekends, and holidays. I routinely pulled 80-hour work weeks, surviving on cold hospital cafeteria coffee and sheer adrenaline. I watched my friends get married, buy houses, and take vacations while I spent my days off sleeping in exhaustion, only to wake up and go right back to the emergency room. But even the overtime was not enough to cover the staggering monthly installments. 2 months after my dad's surgery, I realized I needed a lump sum of cash. I had a beautiful vintage Ford Mustang that my dad and I had spent 3 years restoring when I was in high school. It was my pride and joy, the only possession I truly loved. I drove it to a classic car dealership and sold it for $35,000. Handing over the keys felt like ripping a piece of my own heart out of my chest. I took the bus home that day, holding a cashier's check that went directly to the hospital billing office the very next morning. I never told my father about the car. I told him it broke down and was too expensive to fix, so I bought a cheap used sedan instead. I never told him about the debt. I did not want him to spend his recovery feeling guilty. I wanted him to focus on healing. But what broke me was not the grueling shifts. It was not the loss of my car. It was the absolute theft of my sacrifice by the people I was trying to save. 7 months after the surgery, my father was finally healthy enough to host a family Thanksgiving dinner. Our extended family gathered in the dining room, passing bowls of mashed potatoes and carving the turkey. My dad looked healthy, his cheeks flush with color. I sat at the far end of the table, nursing a glass of water, so exhausted from a double shift that my hands were visibly trembling. Halfway through the dinner, my mother stood up and tapped her wine glass with a spoon. The room fell silent. "I want to make a toast," my mother announced, her eyes shining with tears as she looked around the table. "This year has been the hardest year of our lives. We almost lost Richard. But we are sitting here today celebrating as a family because of one person." She turned her gaze directly to Liam, who was sitting at the center of the table, sipping an expensive glass of red wine. "If it were not for Liam," my mother said, her voice swelling with immense pride. "If it were not for his financial brilliance and his incredible generosity, we would have lost this house. Liam stepped up and took care of everything. He paid the medical bills. He saved our family. Let us raise a glass to my incredible son." The entire table erupted in applause. My aunts and uncles murmured their approval, raising their glasses toward Liam. And Liam, my brother, who had not contributed a single penny, smiled a humble, modest smile. He actually raised his glass in return and said, "Family comes first, Mom." I would do anything for Dad. I sat frozen in my chair. The air was sucked out of my lungs. I looked at Liam, waiting for him to correct her. I waited for him to say that it was actually Sarah who paid the bills. Sarah who worked the night shifts. Sarah who sold her car. But he said nothing. He just soaked up the admiration like he had earned every drop of it. I looked at my mother. I knew she was aware of the truth. She knew I had signed the payment plan. She knew I was the one working myself to the bone. But the truth did not fit her narrative. A daughter working as a nurse paying the bills was a story of blue-collar struggle. A wealthy son trading crypto and bailing out his parents was a story of success, power, and prestige. My mother chose the story she preferred, and she completely erased me to make it work. I gripped my napkin tightly under the table. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull the billing receipts out of my purse and throw them onto the dining room table. But I looked at my dad. He was smiling at Liam, looking so proud, so happy, so incredibly at peace. If I exposed the lie right then, I would break his heart. I would humiliate him in front of his brothers and sisters. I would ruin the Thanksgiving dinner he had been looking forward to for months. So I did what I always did in the Jenkins family. I swallowed my pain. I stayed quiet. I let them have their perfect illusion. For the next 3 years, I continued to pay off the debt. I transferred thousands of dollars every single month to the hospital finance department. And at every family gathering, every holiday, every birthday, I listened to my mother tell our relatives how Liam was the savior of the family. I became the invisible workhorse, the background character who quietly kept the entire structure from collapsing, while my brother stood on the balcony and took a bow. And that is exactly what brings us to tonight. Tonight is my father's 65th birthday, the man whose life I saved, the man whose medical bills I paid off in full just 6 months ago. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the closed closet door, where my emerald dress hung in the dark. My mother had just called to ban me from the party. She was terrified that my presence, the presence of a working nurse, would shatter the glamorous illusion Liam was trying to sell to his wealthy new fiancée, Chloe Sterling. It was the ultimate betrayal. It was not enough that they stole my credit. It was not enough that they erased my sacrifice. Now my actual physical presence was considered too shameful to be allowed in the same room as them. They were going to spend the evening toasting to Liam's fake success, eating expensive cake, and celebrating a life that I had bought and paid for, while I sat alone in my apartment because I was not good enough for their society. A deep, hollow ache settled in my chest. I felt a profound sense of foolishness. I had sacrificed my youth, my peace of mind, and my financial stability for people who viewed me as nothing more than an inconvenient embarrassment. I had played the role of the dutiful daughter, hoping that one day they would see me, really see me, and acknowledge what I had done. But tonight proved that day would never come. They did not want a dutiful daughter. They wanted a golden son, even if everything about him was a complete fabrication. I leaned forward and put my head in my hands. The silence of my apartment was deafening. I imagined the hotel ballroom. I pictured the Sterling family, wealthy and elegant, shaking hands with my parents. I pictured Liam wrapping his arm around Chloe, charming everyone in the room. I pictured my father smiling, completely unaware that his own daughter had been banished to protect a lie. I made a silent promise to myself right then and there. I was done trying to earn a place at their table. I was done protecting their secrets. I was done letting them use my quiet dignity as a rug to wipe their feet on. Tomorrow, I would block their numbers. I would grieve the family I never really had, and I would move on with my life. I would leave them to their illusions. But illusions are fragile things. They require constant maintenance, and sometimes they shatter in spectacular ways when you least expect it. I lifted my head from my hands, ready to finally turn off the bedside lamp and force myself to sleep. I was ready to let the night end. Then, cutting through the heavy silence of my bedroom, my cell phone began to ring. The silence in my apartment was absolute, pressing against my ears like a heavy blanket. I sat at my small kitchen table, staring down at a plastic container of leftover chicken and rice. It was cold. I had not even bothered to heat it up in the microwave. I was still wearing my faded blue hospital scrubs, the exact uniform my mother had declared too shameful to be seen in the presence of the wealthy Sterling family. I took a bite of the cold rice, but it tasted like ashes in my mouth. I could not swallow. I looked at the clock on my microwave. It was 8:15 in the evening. I knew exactly what was happening at the luxury hotel downtown. Dinner service would be ending. The waiters would be clearing the expensive china plates. My father would be standing up at the head of the long banquet table, adjusting his tie, raising a glass of champagne to toast his 65th birthday. He would look around the grand ballroom surrounded by crystal chandeliers and opulent floral arrangements, and he would smile at Liam. He would smile at the son who had contributed absolutely nothing to his survival, completely oblivious to the fact that his daughter had been banished into the shadows to maintain a carefully constructed lie. I closed my eyes and let my head drop into my hands. The physical exhaustion of my 12-hour emergency room shift was finally catching up to me, settling deep into my bones. But the physical ache was nothing compared to the hollow tearing sensation in my chest. I had sold my car. I had worked 80-hour weeks. I had paid $120,000 to fix my father's failing heart, and my reward was being erased. I told myself to just go to bed. I told myself to turn off the lights, pull the covers over my head, and wake up tomorrow as someone who no longer cared. Then my cell phone shattered the quiet. The harsh ringtone made me flinch. I opened my eyes and looked at the screen lighting up the dark kitchen counter. It was an unknown number. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. I assumed it was the hospital calling me to cover another shift or maybe a telemarketer. But the phone kept ringing with an urgent, relentless rhythm. It stopped, and then a split second later, it immediately started ringing again. Someone was desperate. I reached out and swiped the screen to answer, bringing the phone to my ear. "Hello?" I said, my voice flat and tired. For the first 2 seconds, I could not hear a human voice at all. The audio pouring through the speaker was pure, unfiltered chaos. I heard the sharp, terrifying sound of glass shattering against a hard floor. I heard a woman screaming a high-pitched wail of absolute panic. Overneath it all, a string quartet was still playing a classical melody, creating a surreal, horrifying soundtrack to whatever disaster was unfolding on the other end of the line. Sarah, a woman's voice, gasped into the receiver. She was crying so hard she was hyperventilating, her breath catching in jagged, ragged sobs. "Sarah, please tell me this is Sarah Jenkins." Every single nerve in my body snapped to attention. The rejected daughter vanished, and the emergency room head nurse took over instantly. The exhaustion bled out of my muscles, replaced by a massive spike of pure adrenaline. "Yes, this is Sarah," I said, my tone dropping into the calm, authoritative register I used during mass casualty traumas. "Who is this? Where are you?" "It is Chloe," the woman cried. "Chloe Sterling, Liam's fiancée. Sarah, you have to help us. Please, God, you have to help us. We are at the hotel. It is your father." My blood ran completely cold. The image of my father on a hospital stretcher 4 years ago flashed behind my eyes. "Chloe." "Take a deep breath," I commanded, my voice slicing through her panic. "Tell me exactly what happened to my dad. Do not guess. Just tell me what you see right now." "He collapsed." Chloe sobbed, her words tumbling over each other in sheer terror. "He was standing on the stage. He was giving a toast to Liam. He just stopped talking. He grabbed his chest. His face went completely gray, and he just fell forward. He hit the floor so hard, Sarah. He is not moving. He is turning blue. He was having a massive cardiac event. My father's heart, the heart I had worked for 4 years to repair, was failing him again." "Where is Liam?" I demanded, already standing up from the kitchen table, my eyes scanning the room for my keys. "Put Liam on the phone right now. He ran." Chloe wailed, the devastation in her voice, cutting through the background noise of the panicked ballroom. "When your dad went down, Liam just froze. I screamed at him to do something, but he just backed away. He dropped his phone on the floor, pushed past the waiters, and ran out the service doors. He left us here. He abandoned his own father." A wave of pure, white-hot disgust washed over me. Liam, the golden child, the self-proclaimed finance mogul who always bragged about protecting his family, had bolted like a coward. The second real trauma stared him in the face. My mother had banned me from this party to protect his image. And in the end, his image was nothing but a fragile shell over a weak, pathetic man. Where is my mother? I asked, my voice hard. She is on the floor screaming, Chloe cried. She is shaking him and screaming, but she is not helping. Nobody knows what to do. The hotel staff called for an ambulance, but they said it will take at least 8 minutes to get through the downtown traffic. He does not have 8 minutes, Sarah. He is not breathing. Chloe listened to me very carefully, I said, walking briskly toward my front door. How did you get my number? Liam told you I was a hospital executive. An executive cannot help you right now. I heard Chloe let out a wet, desperate sob. I grabbed the phone Liam dropped. She explained, her voice trembling. I searched your name in his contacts, hoping you could pull some strings with the hospital administration. But he did not have you saved as a CEO. He had you saved as emergency contact nurse. Sarah, please tell me you are a nurse. Please tell me you know what to do. The sheer irony of the situation hit me like a freight train. Liam had lied to the Sterling family to make himself look superior. He had been so ashamed of my blue-collar profession that he reinvented my entire life. But when his father was dying on the floor of a luxury ballroom, it was not an executive he needed. It was not a finance broker he needed. He needed the very nurse he had tried so hard to hide. I am a nurse, Chloe, I said firmly, throwing my front door open and sprinting down the hallway of my apartment building. I am the head nurse of the emergency department. I do this every single day. I can save him, but you are going to have to be my hands until I get there. Do exactly what I tell you. Do you understand me? Yes, Chloe choked out. Yes, tell me what to do. I will do anything. Put the phone on speaker and drop it on the floor right next to his ear. I instructed, bursting out of the stairwell and running toward my car. Tell the crowd to step back. Give him air. If my mother tries to grab him, you physically push her out of the way. You have to take control of that room right now, Chloe. I heard the rustle of fabric and the clatter of the phone hitting the hardwood floor of the ballroom. I heard Chloe screaming at the wealthy guest to back away. I heard my mother wailing in the background, a high, useless sound of panic. Then Chloe's voice came back closer to the microphone this time. Okay, she said, panting heavily. Okay, I am on the floor next to him. I am on my knees. Look at his chest, I ordered, shoving my key into the ignition and starting my engine. Is his chest rising and falling? Look closely. A brief pause. No, Chloe cried. Sarah, it is not moving at all. His lips are turning purple. You have to start chest compressions immediately, I said, pulling out of my parking spot and hitting the gas. Put the heel of your dominant hand directly in the center of his chest, right between his nipples. Put your other hand on top of it and interlock your fingers. Lock your elbows straight. I am doing it, Chloe said, her voice shaking with fear. I am in position. You need to push hard and push fast. I instructed, my eyes locked on the road ahead, navigating the dark Chicago streets. You have to push down at least 2 inches. It is going to take a lot of force. Do not worry about hurting him. If you hear a crack, that means you are pressing hard enough. You have to keep the blood pumping to his brain, Chloe. I heard a heavy thud through the speaker, then another, then another. Chloe was actually doing it. This wealthy woman in an expensive evening gown was kneeling on a ballroom floor, fighting to save the life of a man her cowardly fiancé had abandoned. Keep going, I encouraged her, my voice acting as a steady metronome over the phone. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep that rhythm. Push exactly when I say the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. He is so cold. Sarah, Chloe sobbed between compressions. I am pushing, but nothing is happening. He is not waking up. Do not stop, I commanded sharply. CPR does not wake people up. It keeps the organs alive until the defibrillator arrives. You are pumping his heart manually. You are buying him time. Keep pushing. 1, 2, 3, 4. I was flying down this avenue now, pushing my car well over the speed limit. The downtown hotel was 2 miles away. I knew every intersection, every red light, every back alley shortcut. I kept the rhythm going out loud, anchoring Chloe to my voice, refusing to let her panic take over. Where is the hotel staff? I asked over the rhythmic thumping of Chloe's compressions. Do they have an AED, an automated external defibrillator? Every major hotel is required to have one in the lobby. Someone went to look for it. Chloe gasped out, clearly exhausted from the physical exertion of CPR. But they are not back yet. Sarah, I am getting tired. My arms are burning. You cannot stop. I told her, my tone dropping into absolute steel. If you stop, he dies. Think about the anger you feel toward Liam right now. Think about the coward who left you on the floor to deal with this. Use that anger. Push it through your hands. Do not let this man die because his son is a weak coward. 1, 2, 3, 4. I heard Chloe let out a feral guttural cry, and the compressions grew louder, stronger. She was channeling her rage, turning her betrayal into physical strength. I am 2 minutes away, I said, swerving around a slow-moving taxi and blasting my horn. When I come through those doors, you do not stop compressing until I physically put my hands on his chest. Do you hear me? Yes, Chloe shouted back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Yes, just hurry, please hurry. I saw the towering facade of the luxury hotel looming ahead. The flashing red and blue lights of an approaching ambulance were reflecting off the glass windows of the surrounding skyscrapers, but they were coming from the opposite direction, stuck behind a line of gridlocked traffic. I knew I was going to beat them inside. I slammed my car into the loading zone directly in front of the hotel entrance, throwing it into park and leaving the engine running. I grabbed my phone off the passenger seat and sprinted toward the revolving glass doors. Keep going, Chloe, I yelled into the phone as I burst into the grand lobby. I am in the building. I am coming. The lobby was in absolute turmoil. Well-dressed guests were huddled in corners, whispering and pointing toward the grand ballroom at the end of the hallway. Hotel security guards were running back and forth, looking completely overwhelmed by the situation. Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody paid any attention to the woman running past them in faded blue hospital scrubs. I pushed through the massive mahogany double doors of the ballroom. The scene inside was exactly as chaotic as it had sounded over the phone. Tables were overturned, expensive centerpieces were shattered on the floor, and a large crowd of people in tuxedos and evening gowns stood in a wide circle staring in horrified fascination. In the very center of the room, my father lay motionless on his back. His face was a terrifying shade of gray. My mother was kneeling near his head, weeping loudly into her hands, completely paralyzed by fear. And right beside my father, her beautiful silk dress ruined her hair. Falling out of its elegant updo was Chloe Sterling. She was pushing down on my father's chest with everything she had, her face contorted in fierce determination, counting out loud to the rhythm I had given her over the phone. I did not care about the wealthy guests staring at me. I did not care about my mother looking up in absolute shock as I stormed into the room she had banned me from. I dropped my phone, shoved my way through the crowd, and dropped to my knees right beside the woman my brother had abandoned. Completely abandoned. Chloe's face was drenched in sweat and tears. Her hands were bruised and shaking as she pressed against my father's sternum. I grabbed her wrist gently but firmly, stopping her frantic compressions. I have him, I said, my voice steady and commanding. You did beautifully, Chloe. Let me take over right now. She fell back onto the cold marble floor, gasping for air. Her ruined silk gown spread around her like a deflated parachute. I immediately locked my hands together, positioned the heel of my palm exactly in the center of my father's chest, and threw my entire body weight forward. 1, 2, 3, 4. The deep, heavy thud of my compressions echoed in the massive ballroom, drowning out the murmurs of the horrified crowd. My mother was still screaming on the other side of my father's body. When she finally looked up and saw me, her eyes went wide with a mixture of absolute shock, confusion, and raw horror. Sarah, she shrieked, her voice cracking under the weight of her own panic. What are you doing here? I told you not to come. Look at what you are wearing. Even now, as her husband lay dying on the floor of a luxury hotel, her primary concern was the faded blue hospital scrubs I was wearing. She reached out and tried to grab my shoulder to pull me away from my life-saving rhythm. I did not stop my compressions. I did not break my focus. But I turned my head and looked her dead in the eye. Back away from me, I barked, projecting my voice so loudly it silenced her instantly. "If you touch me again, he dies right here on the floor. Get out of my way." A hotel manager burst through the crowd carrying a bright yellow automated external defibrillator. I shouted at him to bring it directly to me. I did not politely ask. I commanded the room with the absolute authority of an emergency room head nurse. The wealthy guest men in custom-tailored tuxedos and women in designer evening gowns scrambled backward, parting like the Red Sea to let the manager through. I grabbed the machine, popped the latch, and ripped open the packaging containing the sticky electrode pads. "I need his chest bare," I yelled to the manager. "Rip his shirt open right now." The manager grabbed the lapels of my father's expensive dress shirt and pulled hard. Buttons popped off and bounced across the polished floor, clinking against the expensive shoes of the high society guests. I slapped the pads onto my father's chest, one on the upper right, one on the lower left, exactly as I had done 1,000 times in the trauma bay. But doing this to a stranger is one thing. Doing it to the man who raised you, the man who let you be banished to protect a fragile lie, is a completely different kind of agony. The machine's robotic voice pierced the heavy silence of the room, analyzing heart rhythm. "Do not touch the patient." I threw my hands up in the air and shouted to the crowd, "Everybody clear! Do not touch him." The grand ballroom was so quiet I could hear the collective breathing of 100 wealthy guests. They were staring at me. They were staring at the woman my brother had claimed was a high-powered hospital executive, now kneeling in cheap cotton scrubs, her hair messy, sweat dripping down her face, fighting a brutal physical battle against death. The machine beeped. "Shock advised," the robotic voice declared loudly. "Charging. Stand clear. Clear!" I screamed again, making sure my mother had not crawled back to his side. I pressed the flashing orange button. My father's body jerked violently off the floor as the electrical current blasted through his failing heart. As soon as he dropped back down, I slammed my hands back onto his chest and resumed my brutal compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Come on, Dad," I muttered under my breath, pushing down with all my strength. "You do not get to die tonight. You do not get to leave me with this mess." Suddenly, the heavy wooden double doors at the back of the ballroom flew open. 5 paramedics from the Chicago Fire Department rushed in, carrying their heavy trauma bags and a mobile stretcher. I recognized 2 of them immediately. They brought critical patients to my emergency room all the time. Sarah, one of the paramedics, shouted, dropping to his knees right beside me. "We got your call from dispatch." "What is his exact status?" I kept compressing as I gave my report in rapid-fire medical terminology. 65-year-old male witnessed cardiac arrest. Bystander CPR initiated within 1 minute. 1 shock delivered via AED. No pulse yet. Get the monitor on him and push 1 milligram of epinephrine right now. The paramedics moved like a well-oiled machine, seamlessly taking over the physical labor, while I finally stepped back. I stood at my knees, trembling slightly from the massive adrenaline crash. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand, taking deep, shaky breaths. For the first time since I ran into the building, I looked around the room. The absolute silence was deafening. The entire Sterling family, Chloe's parents, her aunts, her wealthy uncles, were standing just a few feet away. They were looking at me with total bewilderment. Mr. Sterling, a tall, imposing man who commanded a massive corporate real estate empire, stepped forward from the crowd. He looked at my faded blue scrubs. He looked at the practical rubber clogs on my feet. Then his eyes locked onto the bright white plastic badge dangling from the clip on my chest pocket. He leaned in slightly, his eyes narrowing as he read the bold black letters aloud in the perfectly quiet room. "Sarah Jenkins, head nurse, emergency department." He slowly turned his head to look directly at my mother. My mother looked like all the blood had been completely drained from her body. Her face was chalk white. She opened her mouth to speak, but she had absolutely nothing to say. The magnificent glamorous illusion she and Liam had painstakingly built was lying shattered on the floor right next to my father's popped shirt buttons. I thought Liam said his sister was the chief executive officer of the hospital network. Mrs. Sterling said, her voice dripping with profound confusion and a sudden sharp edge of suspicion. "Why is she wearing a nurse's uniform and performing CPR on the floor?" My mother swallowed hard, her eyes darting frantically around the room, desperately looking for an escape route that simply did not exist. There must be a misunderstanding, she stammered weakly, her voice trembling. Liam must have misspoken when he told you about her career. He did not misspeak, I said clearly, my voice carrying to every single corner of that luxurious ballroom. My brother lied to you. He lied to you because he is deeply ashamed of the fact that I work for a living. I am a nurse. I have always been a nurse. And if it were not for the fact that I am a nurse, my father would be dead right now because Liam ran out the back service door like a coward. The second things got difficult. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd of wealthy guests. The hypocrisy of my family was completely laid bare for everyone to see. They had banished me to protect a glamorous lie, but the lie had collapsed under the brutal weight of reality. The Sterlings were not looking down on me because I wore scrubs. They were looking at my mother with pure, unadulterated disgust because they realized they had been lied to by a family of absolute frauds. "We have a pulse!" One of the paramedics shouted brightly, completely breaking the heavy tension in the room. "Heart rate is 40 and climbing. Blood pressure is palpable. Let us load him up and get him to the trauma center right now." They lifted my father onto the stretcher, securing him with thick straps and continuing to bag him with pure oxygen. I did not wait for my mother to gather her ruined pride from the floor. I did not wait for the Sterlings to ask me any more probing questions. I turned on my heel and followed the paramedics out the door, walking right past the empty Fiancée, horrified faces of the very people who had deemed me unworthy of their presence just 2 hours ago. I drove my own car closely behind the ambulance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned bright white. The heavy rain had started to fall, smearing the bright neon lights of the city across my windshield. The adrenaline was slowly leaving my system, replaced by a cold, hard, unshakable clarity. I had saved his life again. I had done my duty as a devoted daughter and as a trained medical professional. But the final tie binding me to my parents had been completely severed on that ballroom floor. I saw exactly who they were, and I saw exactly what they valued over me. I arrived at the hospital and bypassed the crowded main waiting room entirely, using my employee access badge to walk straight through the secure double doors of the emergency department. The staff on duty, my own dedicated team, immediately updated me on my father's critical condition. He was stable. The bypass grafts from 4 years ago had miraculously held up, but a new, severe blockage had caused the sudden arrest. They were taking him straight up to the catheterization lab to place an emergency stent. He was going to live to see another day. I walked back out into the main public corridor of the hospital, leaning heavily against the cold tile wall and letting out a long, shaky breath. I was preparing myself to leave the building. I had absolutely no intention of waiting around for my mother to arrive, so she could yell at me for ruining her perfect high society night. I was going to get a cup of black coffee from the break room, walk out to my car, and go home to my quiet apartment. But before I could take a single step toward the exit, the automatic glass doors of the emergency room waiting area slid open violently. Chloe walked through them. She was completely alone. Her expensive silk gown was stained with sweat and dark dirt from kneeling on the hotel floor. Her perfect makeup was entirely ruined, leaving dark, messy streaks down her pale cheeks. She looked absolutely exhausted, but there was a fierce, terrifying intensity burning in her eyes. She spotted me leaning against the wall and practically ran down the long corridor. She did not stop to ask about my father's condition. She did not stop to thank me for saving his life. She walked right up to me, reached out with her trembling hands, and grabbed my arm so tightly it bruised. "Sarah," Chloe said, her voice cracking and completely stripped of any high society polish. "I need to talk to you right now. Somewhere private. Somewhere nobody else can possibly hear us." I looked down at her bruised hands clutching my arm. "Chloe, my dad is going up to the cath lab right now. He is stable. You can go home and rest. You do not have to deal with this family anymore tonight." "This is not about your father," Chloe whispered frantically, her eyes wide with a manic, desperate energy. When Liam ran away from the ballroom, he dropped his expensive suit jacket on the floor. I picked it up to carry it out with me. I found something hidden inside his inner pocket, Sarah. I found folded bank statements. I frowned, not understanding why this was so urgent right now. Bank statements. Liam is always carrying financial documents around to make himself look important to other people. It does not actually mean anything, Chloe. You do not understand. Chloe said, a loud sob tearing its way out of her throat. She looked around the empty hospital corridor to make sure we were alone, then leaned in close, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. Liam is not a successful crypto investor. He has absolutely no portfolio. He is completely broke. He owes hundreds of thousands of dollars to very dangerous private lenders, and they are threatening to hurt him. He showed me the fake accounts to get me to trust him. And Sarah, he emptied our joint wedding fund today. $200,000 of my money is completely gone. My stomach drops straight to the floor. The golden son, the brilliant financial savior of the Jenkins family, was a complete and utter fraud. But that was not what made the blood freeze solid in my veins. It was what Chloe said next. I confronted him about missing funds 2 weeks ago. Chloe cried, hot tears streaming down her face. He swore to me he took the money for a good reason. He swore he had to use my money to pay a massive medical debt for your father. He told me he paid $120,000 to save your dad's life 4 years ago, and the hospital was coming after him for the rest. Sarah, please look me in the eye and tell me the truth. Did my money go to this hospital? Did Liam pay for your father's surgery? The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor hummed with a low, steady buzz. My father was finally stable. The surgical team had just rushed him up to the catheterization lab to place a stent, and the immediate terrifying threat of death had passed. The adrenaline that had carried me through the frantic chest compressions and the shock of the defibrillator was slowly draining out of my muscles, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating exhaustion. I stood leaning against the cold tile wall of the hallway, my hospital scrub sticking to my skin with sweat, staring at the woman standing in front of me. Chloe Sterling, the wealthy, polished heiress my mother had worshipped, was completely falling apart right before my eyes. Her designer silk evening gown was ruined, stained with the dust and dirt from the hotel ballroom floor where she had kneeled to pump my father's failing heart. Her hands were shaking violently as she clutched a crumpled stack of papers against her chest. She did not look like a high society bride anymore. She looked like a woman who had just realized she was standing on the edge of a very high cliff. Sarah, please, Chloe whispered, her voice cracking with raw panic. We need to go somewhere private. I cannot breathe out here. I cannot let anyone see these. I nodded slowly, my professional instincts taking over even as my own heart pounded against my ribs. I gently took her by the elbow and led her down the quiet hallway, swiping my employee badge to open the door to a small, secluded family consultation room. It was a room I usually used to deliver tragic news to grieving families. Tonight, it felt like I was the one about to receive the tragic news. I closed the heavy wooden door behind us, shutting out the hospital noise. The room was perfectly quiet. Chloe collapsed into one of the chairs, dropping her ruined designer purse on the floor. She spread the crumpled papers out on the small round table between us. Her hands were trembling so badly that the papers rattled against the wood. I looked down at the documents. They were bank statements. They were financial summaries from several different institutions, heavily redacted with red ink. But the final balances were brutally clear. I found these stuffed inside the lining of Liam's suit jacket. Chloe explained, her voice thick with tears. When he ran out of the ballroom, he threw his jacket off. I picked it up to carry it with me, and I felt something stiff hidden in the lining. I thought maybe it was his wedding vows. I thought maybe he had written something sweet for our rehearsal dinner. But it was not vows, Sarah. It was this. I leaned forward and examined the top page. It was a statement for a high-yield savings account, a joint account bearing both of their names. The starting balance from 30 days ago was $250,000. The current available balance was $0. Every single penny had been withdrawn in a series of massive wire transfers over the past 3 weeks. I stared at the numbers, trying to comprehend the sheer scale of the theft. $250,000. Gone. Chloe pulled another sheet of paper from the pile. It was a demand letter from a private lending firm, a company known in financial circles for issuing high-interest short-term loans to people who could not secure traditional banking credit. The letter was addressed directly to Liam. It detailed a staggering mountain of debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars owed, with exorbitant late fees piling up by the exact day. He is broke, Chloe sobbed, burying her face in her hands. He is completely, absolutely broke. All this time, he told me he was a successful cryptocurrency investor. He showed me screenshots of massive digital portfolios. He drove that expensive Porsche. He wore custom Italian suits. He talked about aggressive wealth-building strategies with my father. He convinced my parents that he was a financial genius. But it was all a complete fabrication. He is a fraud, Sarah. He does not have a dime to his name. I stood frozen in the quiet consultation room. The golden child of the Jenkins family, the son my mother had endlessly praised as our ultimate savior, was nothing but a hollow shell. Liam had built an entire identity on smoke and mirrors. He had leveraged my parents' desperate need for a successful son to mask his own catastrophic failures. He had parked a leased luxury car in their driveway while drowning in predatory loans. He had smiled at the Thanksgiving table, accepting the praise for saving our family, while secretly spiraling into absolute financial ruin. But the betrayal went so much deeper than just a fake portfolio. He had stolen from the woman he was supposed to marry. Chloe, I said gently, sitting down in the chair next to her. Chloe, I am so incredibly sorry. This is a massive crime. He emptied your joint account. You have to call your father. You have to call the police. This is grand larceny. She shook her head frantically, her blonde hair falling in messy strands across her tear-stained face. You do not understand the worst part, she cried, wiping her eyes with the back of her trembling hand. When I noticed a withdrawal of $50,000 2 weeks ago, I confronted him. I demanded to know where the money was going. I told him we needed that money to secure the venue for our wedding. I was ready to walk away right then and there. I was ready to call the whole thing off. I waited, my stomach twisting into a tight, painful knot. I knew my brother was a liar, but I was about to find out exactly how low he was willing to stoop to protect his illusion. He broke down crying. Chloe continued, her voice dropping to a devastated whisper. He fell to his knees in my living room. He told me he was carrying a terrible, shameful burden. He said that 4 years ago, your father suffered a massive heart attack and needed a life-saving bypass surgery. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at Chloe, completely unable to speak. The walls of the small consultation room suddenly felt like they were closing in on me. He told me that your parents had terrible insurance. Chloe sobbed, the words pouring out of her in a rush of pure agony. He said the hospital bill was $120,000 and that the hospital was threatening to take your parents' house. He told me he stepped up and put the entire debt in his own name to save his father. He said the crypto market crashed right after that, and he got stuck with the massive interest payments. He claimed the hospital collection agency was coming after him, threatening to ruin his credit right before our wedding. I closed my eyes. The sheer audacity of the lie was suffocating. I remembered the exact moment my mother had praised Liam at the Thanksgiving table. I remembered the way he had smiled and accepted the credit for my sacrifice. He had not just stolen my credit to look good in front of our relatives. He had weaponized my sacrifice to steal money from his wealthy fiancée. He had monetized my 80-hour work weeks. He had monetized the sale of my beloved vintage car. He had used my blood, sweat, and tears as a sob story to drain $250,000 from an innocent woman. He told me he was too proud to ask for help. Chloe cried, her voice echoing in the quiet room. He said he was trying to protect me from his family financial mess. He played the hero Sarah. He played the selfless, devoted son who sacrificed his own wealth to keep his father alive. He made me feel guilty for even questioning the missing money. I felt so incredibly sorry for him. I hugged him. I told him he was a good man. I told him we would pay it off together. I willingly gave him the access codes to the rest of the savings account because I thought I was helping him save his family from absolute ruin. Chloe looked up at me. Her eyes were red and swollen, filled with a desperate, pleading vulnerability. She reached across the small table and grabbed both of my hands. Her grip was surprisingly strong, fueled by a mixture of terror and the desperate need for the truth. Sarah, you have to tell me the truth, Chloe begged, her voice cracking on every single syllable. You are the head nurse here. You know how this hospital works. You know what happened 4 years ago. I need you to look me in the eye and tell me where my money went. Did my wedding fund go to this hospital? Did Liam actually pay $120,000 to save your father's life? I sat there in absolute silence. I looked down at Chloe's hands gripping mine. I looked at the crumpled bank statements on the table. The numbers blurred together in front of my eyes. $250,000 stolen. A lifetime of lies. I was completely speechless. The betrayal was so deep, so profoundly monstrous, that my brain simply could not process it fast enough. My brother had not just abandoned my father on the ballroom floor tonight. He had been actively exploiting his illness for years. He had used his own father's failing heart as a crowbar to pry open his fiancée's bank account. And my parents, my mother, did she know? Did my mother ban me from the party tonight just to protect Liam's image? Or did she ban me because she knew that if Chloe and I spent even 5 minutes talking to each other, this entire house of cards would come crashing down? My mother had demanded I stay away to protect Liam's fragile ego. But it was not his ego she was protecting. It was a massive, criminal fraud. I looked into Chloe's tear-filled eyes and felt a cold fury settle deep into my bones. She was begging me for the truth. She wanted to know if her $200,000 wedding fund had gone to save my father's life just as Liam had promised. I did not say a word at first. I could not simply tell her the truth. I had to show her. I stood up from the small consultation table and motioned for her to follow me. I walked her out of the room and down the quiet hallway toward the central nursing station. The night shift staff was busy attending to patients, so no one paid any attention to us as I logged into one of the secure desktop computers. My fingers flew across the keyboard typing in my administrative credentials. I navigated through the hospital's internal billing network, bypassing current records, and digging deep into the archives from 4 years ago. My heart was pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I knew exactly what I was going to find, but seeing it again pulling it from the digital vault made the betrayal feel brand new. I searched my father's patient ID number. The screen loaded, bringing up a detailed ledger of his quadruple bypass surgery and the subsequent cardiovascular intensive care stay. I scrolled down past the itemized surgical charges, past the room fees, straight down to the final payment history. I grabbed the computer mouse and highlighted the final block of text. I stepped back and pointed at the bright screen. "Look," I told Chloe, my voice barely a whisper, but echoing loudly in my own ears. "Read the name on the payment plan. Read the name of the person who paid off the $120,000 debt." Chloe leaned forward. The glow of the monitor illuminated her pale, tear-streaked face. She traced her manicured finger across the screen, reading the official hospital documentation. Payment in full. Payer name Sarah Jenkins. Relationship to patient daughter. Total amount paid $120,000. Chloe let out a sharp, devastated gasp. She covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and absolute clarity. The numbers were right there in black and white. Not a single dollar had ever come from a joint account bearing Liam's name. Not a single payment had ever been wired from a cryptocurrency portfolio. My brother had completely fabricated his heroic sacrifice. I stood beside her, processing the monstrous reality of what my brother had done. Liam had not just stolen my credit to look like the golden child at Thanksgiving dinners. He had actively weaponized my 80-hour work weeks. He had weaponized the sale of my vintage Mustang. He had used my literal blood, sweat, and tears to construct a fake, heroic narrative specifically designed to manipulate a wealthy, innocent woman. He had drained $200,000 of her hard-earned money by playing the selfless, devoted son. He used my sacrifice as a cover to deceive her emotionally and financially. It was the most calculated sociopathic theft I had ever witnessed. "He lied to me," Chloe whispered, staring at my name on the screen. "He lied about everything. He used your father's failing heart to steal my money. He did," I said, my voice hardening into absolute steel. "And he used my life to do it." We stood there in this glow of the computer screen, two women bound together by the profound betrayal of the exact same man. Chloe's sadness was rapidly morphing into something else entirely. I saw her spine straighten. I saw her jaw set. The tears stopped falling. She was no longer a heartbroken bride. She was a woman who had just realized she was engaged to a parasite. "Where is he?" Chloe demanded, turning away from the computer. "Where did that coward run to when he left his father to die on a ballroom floor?" I logged out of the hospital portal. "Let us go find out," I said. We walked away from the nursing station and headed toward the cardiovascular intensive care waiting room on the 4th floor. I knew the protocol. Even though my father was currently in the catheterization lab getting a stent, the family would be directed to wait in the surgical lounge upstairs. Liam had fled the hotel, but I knew he would not just disappear into the city. He had to keep up appearances. He had to show up at the hospital eventually to play the role of the concerned son, especially knowing Chloe's family would be asking questions. As we stepped off the elevator on the 4th floor, the sterile smell of the hospital hit me all over again. The waiting room was at the end of a long, quiet corridor. It was past visiting hours for standard patients, so the hallways were completely deserted. The only sound was the soft squeak of my hospital clogs and the click of Chloe's ruined designer heels on the linoleum floor. We approached the waiting room carefully. The glass windows revealed a completely empty room. The television was playing a late-night news broadcast on silent, casting a blue glow over the empty chairs. My father's surgical team was still working, but my family was nowhere to be found. "They are not here," Chloe whispered, her voice tight with anger. "He ran away again." "No," I said quietly, holding up my hand to stop her. "Listen." I tilted my head. In the absolute quiet of the 4th floor corridor, I could hear a faint echoing sound coming from the heavy metal fire doors that led to the emergency stairwell. It was a voice, a frantic, hushed voice. It belonged to my mother. I motioned for Chloe to be completely silent. We crept forward, moving slowly along the wall until we stood right next to the thick metal door of the stairwell. The door was not latched completely. It was propped open just a fraction of an inch, allowing the acoustics of the concrete stairwell to carry the voices perfectly out into the hallway. I leaned in close to the gap. Chloe stood right beside me, holding her breath. "You cannot just run away like that, Liam. My mother was hissing." Her tone was vicious, stripped entirely of the sweet, refined high society persona she had worn for the Sterling family all night. "What were you thinking? You left your father on the floor. You left Chloe kneeling in the dirt. Do you have any idea how bad that makes you look?" "I panicked, Mom." Liam shot back, his voice echoing loudly against the concrete walls. His voice was high and tight with pure, unadulterated fear. Dad stopped breathing. I did not know what to do. I thought he was dead. I could not just stand there and watch him die. "You should have faked it," my mother snapped coldly. "You should have dropped to your knees and cried. You should have held his hand. You should have done absolutely anything other than run out the back service door like a thief. The Sterlings were watching you. Chloe's father was watching you. That man controls a real estate empire, Liam. He expects strength. He expects leadership. And you ran away." I closed my eyes. Even now, with her husband undergoing emergency heart surgery, my mother was not reprimanding her son for abandoning his dying father. She was reprimanding him for ruining his performance in front of wealthy people. "It gets worse," Mom, Liam said, his voice trembling so violently I could hear it reverberating through the door. "It is not just about tonight. Chloe knows about the money." A sharp, terrible silence fell over the stairwell. Chloe reached out and gripped my forearm, her nails digging into my skin. We both leaned closer to the gap in the door. "What do you mean she knows about the money?" my mother demanded, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "She confronted me 2 weeks ago." Liam confessed, sounding like a terrified child. "She noticed the $50,000 withdrawal from our joint account. She wanted to know where the wedding funds went. I had to tell her something. The private lenders were threatening to break my legs, Mom. The crypto market wiped me out entirely. I had no other choice. I had to use her money to pay off the loan sharks." "You fool!" my mother hissed, pacing angrily on the concrete landing. Her heels clicked loudly against the floor. "You absolute fool. I told you to be careful with those crypto investments. I told you to wait until after the wedding to secure your debts. If the Sterlings find out you are broke, they will cancel this engagement immediately." "I handled it," Liam said defensively. "I told her a story. I told her I had to take the money to pay for Dad's medical debt. I told her Dad's bypass surgery 4 years ago cost $120,000 and that I put the debt in my own name to save the family. I told her the hospital collections were coming after me." There was a brief pause. Then, my mother let out a breath of profound relief. "That was smart," she said. My heart stopped beating. The blood in my veins turned to absolute ice. My own mother, the woman who had watched me sell my car, The woman who had watched me work 80-hour weeks until I literally collapsed from exhaustion, was standing in a hospital stairwell praising my brother for using my sacrifice as a cover story for his criminal theft. It worked for a little while. Liam continued, his voice shaking. Chloe bought it. She felt sorry for me. She thought I was a hero for saving Dad. But then she asked to see the hospital receipts tonight. She wants proof of the medical debt. She was digging around in my suit jacket before the party. And now, after I ran away tonight, she is going to be incredibly suspicious. She is going to start asking questions. Then you have to appease her immediately. My mother ordered, her voice completely devoid of any morality. You have to go out there right now, find her, and play the traumatized son. You tell her you ran away because seeing your father collapse brought back the trauma of paying for his surgery 4 years ago. You tell her you could not bear the thought of losing him after you sacrificed so much of your own wealth to save him. Mom, I do not have the hospital receipts, Liam whined. If she asks for the billing statements, I have absolutely nothing to show her. I will get the receipts, my mother snapped fiercely. I will call Sarah tomorrow morning. I will manipulate her into giving me a copy of the hospital billing records, and I will alter the name on the PDF document before I give it to you. We will change Sarah's name to your name. Chloe will never know the difference. I stood behind the heavy metal door, completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of their calculated evil. This was not a simple misunderstanding. This was an active criminal conspiracy. My mother was deliberately plotting to forge medical documents to help her son steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from his fiancée. You have to fix this, Liam. My mother continued, her voice growing increasingly frantic. You have to convince Chloe to stay with you. If her family cancels this engagement, your father and I will lose everything. What do you mean? Liam asked, sounding confused. My mother let out a frustrated, angry breath. Did you think your father and I had the cash to fund your initial crypto investments? She demanded. Where do you think you got the $200,000 to start your trading portfolio 2 years ago? Silence echoed in the stairwell. We mortgaged the house, Liam. My mother revealed the brutal truth, dropping like a bomb. Your father and I secretly took out a second mortgage on our home and gave you the cash because you promised us a massive return. You promised us we would be millionaires before your father turned 65. And you lost every single penny. If you do not marry Chloe Sterling, if you do not get access to her family's wealth, your father and I will not be able to pay the mortgage. The bank will take our house. I covered my mouth with my hand. The entire twisted, sick puzzle finally snapped into perfect clarity. My parents knew absolutely everything. They knew Liam was broke. They knew he was a fraud. They had willingly mortgaged their own home to fund his gambling addiction disguised as cryptocurrency investments. They had colluded with Liam to deceive Chloe because they needed her money to save themselves from homelessness, and I was their ultimate scapegoat. They had used my $120,000 payment to keep my father alive 4 years ago, completely ignoring my sacrifice while showering Liam with praise. Then when Liam needed a cover story to explain his stolen funds to Chloe, my mother gladly offered up my medical payment as his alibi. And tonight, when they needed to protect Liam's image in front of the Sterling family, they banned me from the birthday party entirely. They threw me away like actual garbage because my presence in a nurse's uniform would destroy the carefully constructed narrative that was keeping them out of bankruptcy. They did not love him more than me. They were using him to dig for gold, and they were using me as the shovel. Beside me, Chloe let out a sharp, ragged breath. Her entire body was trembling with absolute rage. I could see the fury radiating from her skin. She reached out and placed both of her hands flat against the heavy metal fire door. She was preparing to shove it open. She was preparing to storm into that concrete stairwell and tear my mother and brother to absolute shreds. I grabbed her by the shoulders and pulled her back with all the physical strength I had left. I shook my head, my eyes burning with a cold, terrifying clarity. Let me go, Sarah, Chloe whispered furiously, her voice shaking with adrenaline. I am going to destroy them right now. I am going to call the police. No, I whispered back, pulling her away from the door and guiding her quickly down the empty corridor. I did not want a screaming match in a hospital stairwell. A screaming match would give them a chance to lie. A screaming match would give my mother a chance to twist the narrative and play the victim. I wanted something much more permanent. If we confront them right now, they will deny it, I explained, keeping my voice low and urgent as we walked back toward the surgical waiting room. My mother will say she was just trying to comfort a grieving son. Liam will say he misspoke. They will find a way to manipulate the situation. We need a strategy, Chloe. We need ironclad proof, and we need to burn their entire illusion to the ground in front of the very people they are trying to impress. Chloe looked at me, her chest heaving as she processed my words. The tears were completely gone from her eyes now. They had been replaced by something much darker and far more powerful. Your family is a nightmare, she said, her voice dropping into a deadly composed tone. I know, I replied, staring down the long, empty hospital hallway. But they are about to wake up. I pulled Chloe away from the heavy metal door of the hospital stairwell, my grip firm on her shoulders. Her entire body was vibrating with the kind of pure, unadulterated rage that usually results in screaming and shattered glass. I completely understood her impulse. Every instinct in my own body was screaming at me to kick that door open, to march in there and confront my mother and my brother, to demand an explanation for the monstrous betrayal we had just overheard. But my years working in the emergency department had taught me a vital lesson about chaos. When you are bleeding, you do not thrash around. You apply pressure. You stay completely still. You calculate your next move to ensure your own survival. I walked Chloe down the quiet, sterile hallway, far away from the cardiovascular unit, where my mother and brother were plotting their criminal fraud. I swiped my badge to open an empty staff break room and pulled her inside. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant. I locked the door behind us and turned to face her. Chloe was pacing the small room, her breathing ragged. She looked down at her ruined designer gown, the fabric stained with dust from the hotel ballroom floor where she had fought to save my father. Her hands were clenched into tight fists. She looked up at me, her eyes completely dry now, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. I cannot believe I almost married him, Chloe whispered, her voice dropping into a deadly composed tone. He did not just steal my money, Sarah. He stole my trust. He sat in my living room and cried real tears about saving your father. He used my own empathy against me. He used your sacrifice to make himself look like a hero. I want to go out there right now and destroy him. I want to call the police and have him arrested in the hospital lobby. I walked over to the small table in the center of the break room and pulled out a chair. I motioned for her to sit down. She hesitated for a moment before sinking into the hard plastic seat. If you call the police right now, it will be his word against yours, I explained calmly. We just overheard them in a stairwell. We do not have a recording of that conversation. My mother is a master manipulator. If the police show up tonight, she will cry and tell them that Liam is just a confused, grieving son whose father almost died an hour ago. She will tell them you are having a misunderstanding over wedding finances. Liam will play the victim. They will find a way to twist the narrative, and they will use my father's heart condition as a shield to protect themselves from any immediate consequences. Chloe stared at me, the reality of my words sinking in. What do we do then? She asked. We cannot just let them get away with this. They are plotting to forge medical documents. They are plotting to steal more of my family's money to pay off loan sharks. We are not going to let them get away with anything, I said, sitting down directly across from her. But we are going to do this my way. We are going to build an ironclad case. We are going to gather every single piece of paper, every single bank statement, and every single receipt. We are going to build a wall of evidence so high and so thick that they will never be able to climb over it. And when we finally expose them, we will not do it in a quiet hospital corridor. We will do it in the bright light of day where everyone they are trying to impress can see exactly who they are. Chloe and I looked at each other across the small break room table. We were two women from completely different worlds. She was a wealthy heiress who had never wanted for anything in her life. I was a working-class nurse who had sold her only prized possession to pay off a massive medical debt. But sitting in that fluorescent-lit room, we were exactly the same. We were both victims of Liam's predatory greed and my mother's toxic enabling manipulation. I reached my hand across the table. Chloe looked at it for a second, then reached out and grasped it firmly. We shook hands. It was a silent, unbreakable pact. The tears were gone. The sorrow was gone. The raw, agonizing pain of betrayal had officially metastasized into cold, calculated reason. The very next morning, the meticulous process of gathering our evidence began. I woke up after only 3 hours of sleep, drank a large cup of black coffee, and drove straight to my bank. I sat in a private cubicle with a branch manager and requested deeply archived financial records. I had them print out 4 years of comprehensive bank statements. I sat there and watched the printer spit out page after page of my financial history. I took a bright yellow highlighter and marked every single monthly transfer that had gone directly to the hospital billing department. Looking at those numbers on the thick stack of paper was a profound, surreal experience. Each highlighted line represented a massive sacrifice. I saw the $35,000 deposit from the sale of my vintage Mustang. I saw the thousands of dollars I had bled from my savings account every single month. Money that should have gone toward a down payment on a home or a retirement fund. I gathered the documents, placed them in a secure leather folder, and drove to the hospital. I bypassed the emergency room and walked straight up to the Central Finance and Administration office. Because I was a senior staff member, the billing directors knew me well. I requested official certified copies of my father's entire medical billing file from 4 years ago. I requested that the documents bear the official hospital watermark and the signature of the financial director. By the time I left the building that afternoon, I had undeniable, legally binding proof that Sarah Jenkins was the sole financial provider for Richard Jenkins's cardiac surgery. Liam's name did not exist on a single piece of hospital paper. My foundation of evidence was absolutely flawless. While I was securing the medical and personal banking records, Chloe was deploying an absolute arsenal of corporate power. She drove straight to her father's downtown corporate office. Mr. Sterling was a man who moved millions of dollars in real estate before breakfast. When Chloe walked into his private suite, closed the heavy oak doors, and told him the entire story, he did not shout. He did not throw things. According to Chloe, he simply went perfectly still. He listened as she explained the missing $200,000, the predatory loan sharks, the fake crypto portfolios, and the overheard conversation in the hospital stairwell detailing the Jenkins family conspiracy. When she finished, Mr. Sterling picked up his desk phone and made exactly one phone call. He summoned the full weight of the Sterling family's private legal team and their elite forensic accountants. The investigation moved with terrifying speed and absolute silence. Chloe's father instructed his team to dig into every single corner of Liam's financial life. Because Liam had foolishly used his laptop on the Sterling family's secure home network during his visits, their security team was able to legally trace the origin of several digital transfers associated with his accounts. Within 48 hours, the forensic accountants had mapped the entire web of Liam's fraudulent existence. The results were completely staggering. Liam had absolutely no investments in cryptocurrency. He had never made a single successful trade. Instead, he had developed a severe, catastrophic gambling addiction masquerading as high-stakes day trading. The accountants traced the $200,000 stolen from Chloe's joint wedding fund directly to offshore accounts associated with unregulated high-interest debt collectors. Liam was not just broke. He was hundreds of thousands of dollars in the red. But the most devastating discovery came when the legal team investigated my parents' financial history. The lawyers pulled the public property records and the mortgage deeds for the house I had grown up in. The documents confirmed exactly what we had overheard in the stairwell. 2 years ago, my mother and father had signed a massive second mortgage on their property, extracting nearly all the equity they had built over 30 years. They had wired that money directly to Liam, betting their entire retirement and their only home on his fake promises of massive wealth. The house was completely underwater. My parents were facing imminent foreclosure. The only thing keeping the bank from seizing their property was the illusion of Liam's impending marriage to a wealthy heiress. They were literally counting the days until Liam could drain more money from the Sterling family to quietly pay off the second mortgage and save them from living on the street. Chloe and I met late Tuesday night in the back booth of a quiet diner on the edge of the city. She slid a thick, bound dossier across the table to me. I opened it and reviewed the financial devastation her father's team had uncovered. The sheer scale of my family's deception was breathtaking. They were not just toxic parents who favored one child over the other. They were active, desperate conspirators in a massive financial fraud. "We have everything," Chloe said quietly, sipping her black coffee. My father's attorneys have drafted a formal lawsuit against Liam for grand larceny and wire fraud. We have the mortgage records proving your parents' complicity. We have the tracking data showing exactly where my money went. All we need now is the final piece of the puzzle. I nodded, tapping my fingers on the thick leather folder containing my certified hospital receipts. We need them to trap themselves, I said. We need them to confidently present their forged documents. We need them to think they have completely won. That was the hardest part of the entire plan. We had to maintain absolute silence. We had to pretend that nothing had changed. We had to endure their fake smiles and their manipulative phone calls without letting our anger show. The psychological warfare began the very next morning. I was sitting in my apartment when my cell phone rang. It was my mother. I let it ring 3 times, took a deep breath to steady my heart rate, and answered the call. "Sarah." My mother said, her voice dripping with an artificial sugary sweetness that made my skin crawl. "Honey, I am so glad I caught you. How are you holding up?" "I am fine, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice completely neutral. "How is Dad doing?" "He is recovering wonderfully," she said brightly. "The new stent is working perfectly. The doctors say he can go home by the weekend." "Listen, sweetheart, I need a small favor from you. It is just a silly administrative thing." I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter. Here it comes, I thought. The trap is being set. "What do you need?" I asked smoothly. "Well," my mother sighed, sounding like an exhausted but devoted parent. "Liam is trying to get his finances organized for the wedding. His accountant is asking for all his past charitable and family expenses for tax deduction purposes. Liam was hoping to include the money he spent on your father's surgery 4 years ago. Could you possibly log into your hospital portal and send me a digital copy of the billing statements? Just the ones showing the $120,000 total. I know your name is on the paperwork as the administrative contact, but Liam really needs those files for his tax guide today." The lie was so smooth, so perfectly constructed, that I almost had to admire her sociopathic efficiency. She was asking me to hand over the proof of my own sacrifice so she could digitally alter it, replace my name with Liam's, and use it to appease the wealthy bride she was trying to rob. "Of course, Mom," I said, forcing a light, helpful tone into my voice. "I can absolutely do that for you. I will download the PDF from the billing portal and email it to you before my shift starts. Do you just need the final invoice showing the balance paid in full?" "Yes, that would be perfect," my mother said clearly, relieved that I was being so incredibly compliant. "Thank you so much, Sarah. You know Liam appreciates all your help. He is under so much stress right now with the wedding planning. I am happy to help Liam with his wedding," I said, and the double meaning of my words tasted like ash in my mouth. "I will send it right over." I hung up the phone. I opened my laptop, downloaded a completely uncertified basic PDF of the hospital bill, and emailed it to my mother. I knew exactly what she was going to do with it. I knew she was going to spend the afternoon sitting at her computer, carefully erasing my name and typing Liam's name in its place. I knew she was going to hand that forged document to her golden son so he could present it to Chloe as proof of his honor and devotion. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the exact same quiet, obedient daughter who had swallowed their neglect for almost 3 decades. They believed their illusion was completely safe. I texted Chloe the second the email was sent. "The bait has been taken," I wrote. Her reply came back less than a minute later. "Good. My parents are inviting them to the estate this weekend." I set my phone down on the counter and looked out my window at the city skyline. My chest no longer hurt. The hollow, agonizing ache of betrayal had been entirely replaced by the cold, steady rhythm of absolute purpose. My parents had told me my job would bring shame to my father's birthday. They had told me I was an embarrassment. They had hidden me away in the dark, but they were about to learn a very painful lesson. The dark is exactly where you go to load your weapons. And we were about to bring the entire Jenkins family into the blinding, unforgiving light. 3 days after the terrifying incident at the downtown hotel, my father was officially discharged from the cardiovascular intensive care unit. The emergency stent placement had been a complete success. The surgical team sent him home with a new regimen of medications and strict instructions to maintain absolute rest. I did not wait by the hospital doors to see him out. I was inside the building, actively managing the chaos of the emergency department floor. But I purposefully kept my distance. I knew my mother would be hovering around him like a protective hawk, guiding him to the car, already weaving her own twisted version of the night's events, to ensure he suspected nothing of Liam's cowardice. That evening, the heavy silence of my apartment was broken by the sharp ring of my cell phone. I was sitting on my couch meticulously reviewing the legal dossier Chloe had given me. The bright screen illuminated the dark living room, flashing with my mother's name. I let it ring twice consciously, steadying my breathing. I had to play the exact role Chloe and I had rehearsed. I swiped the screen to answer. "Sarah," my mother said. Her voice was not warm, but it was carefully controlled entirely, stripped of the frantic, hysterical panic I had overheard in the hospital stairwell just a few nights prior. "Your father is home. He is resting comfortably in his own bed. I am very glad to hear that, Mom," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly flat and submissive. "The surgical team told me his prognosis is excellent if he avoids any major stress." "Yes. Well, it was a deeply terrifying night for all of us," she continued smoothly, slipping right into her fabricated narrative. "Liam was absolutely beside himself. You know how sensitive your brother is. Seeing your father collapse on that stage triggered all those terrible memories from 4 years ago, back when Liam had to drain his own investment accounts to pay for that awful bypass surgery." I gripped the edge of my wooden coffee table so hard my knuckles turned white. She was actively testing the waters. She was feeding the lie directly to me, brazenly, daring me to correct her. "It must have been very hard for him," I said quietly, forcing the words out of my throat. My mother let out a small, immensely satisfied breath. "It was. But he is a strong man, and he is holding this family together right now, which brings me to the real reason I'm calling you." Her tone suddenly shifted, the artificial sweetness evaporating into something sharp, cold, and undeniably threatening. "Chloe has been very emotional lately. She has been asking intrusive questions about the past, specifically about the medical bills. Liam gave her the documentation she needed to see, but she might reach out to you to verify things. She is just confused, Sarah. She does not understand how our family handles our private business." "What do you want me to do?" I asked, playing the part of the confused, obedient, discarded daughter to absolute perfection. "I want you to keep your mouth completely shut," my mother snapped, dropping the polite act entirely. "If Chloe calls you or texts you or shows up at your hospital, you will tell her exactly what Liam told her. You will confirm that Liam paid the $120,000 medical debt 4 years ago. You will tell her that he stepped up and protected this family. You will not mention your little hospital payment plan. You will not mention selling your car. You will not breathe a single word about your own involvement." I remained completely silent for 5 long seconds, letting her feel the absolute weight of her monstrous demand. "Sarah, do you hear me?" Her voice rose, tinged with genuine venom. "Liam is marrying into the Sterling family in exactly 3 months. That marriage is going to secure a beautiful, stable future for all of us. If you say anything to ruin this, if you let your petty jealousy over your brother's success poison Chloe's mind, I swear to God, I will cut you out of this family forever. I will formally disown you. You will never see your father again. Do you understand exactly what is at stake here?" I understood exactly what was at stake. The forensic accountants had already shown me the truth. The bank was coming for her house. The underground loan sharks were coming for her golden son. The only thing standing between her family and absolute financial ruin was my continued silence. "I understand, Mom," I said, injecting just enough defeat into my voice to make it utterly believable. "I will not say anything to Chloe. I will completely support Liam's story. You do not have to worry about me." "Good," my mother said coldly. "See that you remember your place. We will talk later." She hung up the phone. I pulled the device away from my ear and smiled in the empty room. It was a cold, hard, calculating smile. The trap was officially set. My mother felt completely secure. She thought she had successfully terrorized her weak, invisible daughter back into total submission. She had absolutely no idea that the invisible daughter was holding the match that was about to burn her entire fake empire to the ground. The very next morning, the second phase of our plan was put into motion. Chloe called me directly from her father's downtown corporate office. Her voice was crisp, intensely focused, and completely devoid of the heartbreak that had consumed her in the hospital hallway. My father just sent the invitation, Chloe told me, her tone carrying the authority of a military commander. A formal courier delivered it to your parents' house 20 minutes ago. It is an invitation to an intimate afternoon tea party at our main estate in the North Shore this coming Sunday. The note says we want to celebrate your father's miraculous recovery and finalize the remaining logistical details for the wedding ceremony. Did they reply? I asked, staring out my window at the busy Chicago streets below. My mother just got off the phone with your mother, Chloe confirmed. Patricia accepted the invitation immediately. She sounded absolutely thrilled. She told my mother that Liam is looking forward to discussing the final catering budget and the floral arrangements. She has absolutely no idea what is actually waiting for them. The North Shore estate was the undisputed crown jewel of the Sterling family's wealth. It was a sprawling historic mansion overlooking the lake surrounded by manicured gardens and iron gates. It was the kind of place that required a formal invitation just to pull into the driveway. For my mother, receiving an exclusive invitation to this specific property was the ultimate validation. It was the absolute proof that her manipulation had worked, that Liam's forged hospital bills had successfully pacified the wealthy bride, and that the Jenkins family was finally going to be accepted into the highest tier of society. Are all the guests confirmed? I asked Chloe. Yes, Chloe replied smoothly. My father's personal legal team will be there. My uncle, who is a sitting judge, is flying in from New York. Our lead forensic accountant will be sitting in the main parlor. They think they are coming to drink Earl Grey tea and look at expensive fabric swatches. They are actually walking into a brutal financial execution. I felt a shiver of pure cold anticipation run down my spine. I will be there at 2 o'clock sharp, I told her. I will park my car out of sight behind the guest house until it is time. I will see you on Sunday, Sarah, Chloe said. We are going to end this. Over the next 48 hours, my mother's absolute delusion reached a fever pitch. I did not have to guess what she was doing or how she was feeling. She broadcasted it to me herself. Knowing that I had agreed to stay silent, she assumed I was safely back under her total control, completely subdued, and ready to be used as a captive audience for her grand triumph. On Friday afternoon, she sent me a relentless barrage of text messages containing photos from high-end boutique dressing rooms on the Magnificent Mile. She sent a picture of a tailored pearl-white Chanel blazer, then a picture of a pristine cream-colored Prada handbag. The text beneath the photos was dripping with manic, unearned excitement. Getting ready for Sunday, my mother wrote. The Sterlings invited us to their private estate for an exclusive tea party to celebrate Liam's wedding. We are finalizing the catering budget with the event planners. It is a very elite gathering, Sarah. I need to make sure our family looks the part. We belong in these circles now. I stared at the photos on my phone screen, my jaw clenching tight. My mother was standing in a brightly lit dressing room, trying on clothes that cost more than my monthly rent, while her actual home was actively facing foreclosure. She had secretly taken out a second mortgage to fund Liam's devastating gambling addiction. She had literally bet her entire retirement, her husband's security, and her family's future on a catastrophic lie. Yet here she was, doubling down on the illusion, spending money she absolutely did not have completely convinced that Liam's impending marriage to Chloe would magically wipe away hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. I replied with a simple, carefully neutral message. The clothes look very nice, Mom. Her response came back instantly. Of course they do. I put them on the new Platinum credit card. Liam says we do not need to worry about the balances anymore. Once the wedding happens, the Sterling family connections will open up massive investment opportunities for him. We are finally getting what we deserve. What we deserve. The phrase echoed in my mind, ringing with a profound, terrifying irony. She honestly believed that lying, stealing, and discarding her own daughter entitled her to a life of absolute luxury. She believed that manipulating an innocent woman into a fraudulent marriage was a perfectly legitimate financial strategy. She was building a massive castle on a foundation of absolute rot, and she was buying expensive curtains for the windows, while the floorboards were literally caving in beneath her feet. On Saturday evening, the tension in my apartment was so incredibly thick, I could practically feel it pressing against my skin. I could not sit still. I paced the length of my living room, going over the precise timeline for tomorrow's tea party in my head. I had my secure leather folder sitting directly on the kitchen counter. Inside were the certified hospital billing records bearing my name. Inside were the official bank statements highlighting every single overtime shift I had worked to keep my father alive. I thought about the last time I had prepared for a family event. I thought about the beautiful emerald silk dress still hanging in the dark at the back of my closet, the dress I was supposed to wear to my father's 65th birthday party. I thought about how my mother had called me, her voice cold as ice, ordering me to stay away because my hospital badge was a disgusting embarrassment. She had wanted to hide my reality so she could showcase Liam's fantasy. Tomorrow, I was not going to wear an evening gown. I was not going to dress to impress the high society crowd in the North Shore. Tomorrow, I was going to walk into the Sterling family estate wearing the exact same faded blue hospital scrubs that my mother despised. I was going to wear the uniform that had paid her husband's medical debt. I was going to force them to look at the undeniable reality they had tried so desperately to bury. My phone buzzed one last time that night. It was a text from Liam. It was the very first time my brother had contacted me since the night of the birthday party, the night he had abandoned his dying father on the ballroom floor and fled into the alley. Mom said, "You are behaving." Liam wrote his arrogance bleeding through the digital screen. "Good. Keep your mouth shut, Sarah. Do not ruin this for me. My life is finally coming together." I did not reply to his message. I turned off my phone, walked into my bedroom, and set my alarm for Sunday morning. The trap was perfectly laid. The bait had been swallowed whole. My mother was currently laying out her brand new Prada handbag, completely oblivious to the fact that her golden son was a criminal fraud. They were sleeping soundly, completely unaware that the wealthy bride they thought they had successfully manipulated was currently sharpening the legal blade that would cut them completely out of her life. The tension in the air was a massive physical weight, but it was no longer fueled by pain, heartbreak, or rejection. It was fueled by pure, unadulterated reason. I was entirely ready. The brutal end of the Jenkins family illusion had finally arrived. Sunday afternoon arrived with bright, clear skies, completely contrasting the dark, devastating storm I was about to bring down upon my family. I drove my 10-year-old car up the winding, tree-lined road toward the North Shore. The Sterling family estate was staggering. It sat behind massive wrought iron gates, surrounded by endless manicured lawns and a circular driveway, completely filled with expensive luxury vehicles. I did not park in the main driveway. I pulled my car around the back, hiding it behind the sprawling stone guest house exactly as Chloe had instructed me to do. I turned off the engine and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, looking down at my clothes. I was not wearing a designer dress. I was not carrying an expensive handbag. I was wearing my faded blue hospital scrubs. My heavy stethoscope hung securely around my neck. My plastic hospital identification badge was clipped firmly to my chest pocket, displaying my name and my title in bold black letters for the world to read, head nurse of the emergency department. My mother had specifically banned me from wearing this exact uniform to my father's birthday party. She had called my life's work a disgusting embarrassment. Today, this uniform was my absolute armor. Today, it was the undeniable proof of my reality against their fabricated illusion. I stepped out of the car and walked quietly through the busy caterer's entrance at the back of the mansion. The event staff was rushing around the massive industrial kitchen, carrying silver trays of delicate pastries and pouring expensive champagne into tall crystal flutes. Because I was wearing medical scrubs, the staff simply assumed I was a private nurse, hired to attend to an elderly guest. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked me any questions. I navigated the long, quiet hallways of the mansion, my rubber hospital clogs making absolutely no sound on the thick imported carpets. I finally reached the heavy oak double doors that led directly into the grand parlor. I stopped and stood perfectly still in the shadows just outside the room. I could hear everything happening inside. I could hear a professional string quartet playing a soft, elegant classical melody. I could hear the gentle clinking of crystal teacups and silver spoons. And soaring above all of it, I could clearly hear my mother. Her laugh was incredibly loud, heavily performative, and entirely fake. She was working the room completely convinced that she had finally arrived in the highest tier of society. I peeked through a narrow gap between the heavy oak doors. The grand parlor was absolutely breathtaking. It featured high vaulted ceilings, antique crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with classic oil paintings. There were about 40 guests mingling comfortably in the opulent room. Chloe had told me exactly who these people were. They were not just casual family friends. They were federal judges, corporate attorneys, banking executives, and real estate tycoons. They were the most powerful and legally astute people in the city. Right in the middle of this elite crowd stood my mother. She was wearing her brand new stark white Chanel blazer and gripping her pristine cream-colored Prada handbag like a trophy. She was chatting animatedly with a woman draped in expensive diamonds, looking totally oblivious to the terrifying reality that her own house was actively facing foreclosure. My father stood nearby, looking incredibly stiff and uncomfortable, but he obediently nodded along with whatever my mother said. Liam was confidently holding court near the massive stone fireplace. He was wearing a custom-tailored Italian suit, holding a crystal glass of bourbon, and laughing loudly with Chloe's wealthy uncles. He looked so incredibly arrogant, so deeply smug, and so entirely sure that his fraudulent life was permanently secure. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the atmosphere in the grand parlor suddenly shifted. Mr. Sterling, Chloe's father, stepped to the absolute center of the room. He was a tall, imposing man who had built a massive corporate empire by destroying his business rivals with cold, ruthless precision. He picked up a silver spoon and tapped it gently against his champagne glass. The sharp, clear, ringing sound cut right through the polite chatter. The string quartet stopped playing immediately. The wealthy guests turned their undivided attention to their host, expecting a warm, sentimental toast about his daughter's upcoming wedding. My mother practically shoved her way to the front of the crowd, pulling my father by the arm so they could stand right next to Liam in the center of the room. She beamed with radiant pride, her chest puffed out eagerly, waiting for the public validation she truly believed she had rightfully earned. Mr. Sterling did not smile. His face was carved from absolute stone. He looked directly at Liam, and the temperature in the room seemed to plummet instantly. "I want to thank all of you for coming to my home today." Mr. Sterling began, his voice low and incredibly powerful. "We invited our closest friends, our legal colleagues, and our trusted business partners here this afternoon, because my family values absolute transparency above all else. We believe that a marriage, just like a successful business, must be built on a foundation of total honesty. If a foundation is built on lies, it must be demolished immediately." The wealthy guests exchanged confused, nervous glances. The glowing, triumphant smile on my mother's face faltered slightly. She looked anxiously at my father, who was suddenly staring very hard at the floor. Liam shifted his weight from one foot to the other, nervously adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit. Mr. Sterling did not say another word. He simply took a deliberate step backward and gestured toward his daughter. Chloe walked to the front of the room. She was not wearing a pretty pastel dress suitable for a bridal tea party. She was wearing a sharp black tailored business suit. She looked completely composed, terrifyingly calm, and absolutely focused. She held a small black remote control tightly in her right hand. She pressed a button, and the heavy velvet curtains covering the massive parlor windows automatically slid shut, plunging the elegant room into dim, dramatic shadow. She pressed another button, and a massive high-definition projector screen descended slowly from the ceiling right behind her. The low hum of the projector machine whirred to life. The tension in the room became incredibly suffocating. I placed my hand on the cold brass handle of the heavy oak doors, completely ready to make my entrance. Chloe clicked the remote one more time. A bright, glaring image flashed onto the massive screen for everyone to see. It was not a romantic photo of the happy couple. It was a highly detailed certified hospital billing document. The official logo of the hospital where I worked was clearly visible at the top of the page. The total amount due was printed in bold red letters, exactly $120,000. Liam took a sudden, staggering step backward, his face draining of all color. He recognized the medical document instantly, but he also realized it was not the forged copy my mother had promised to create for him. Chloe pointed directly at the massive screen. "My fiancé has spent the last month telling me a very moving story." Chloe announced, her voice perfectly steady and amplified in the quiet room. "He told me that he drained his personal wealth to save his father's life 4 years ago. He claimed he paid this massive medical debt, and he used that beautiful, heroic story to explain exactly why his bank accounts are completely empty. But as you can clearly see on the screen, Liam did not pay a single dime." Chloe highlighted a specific section of the document on the screen. The payer's name was magnified for the entire room of powerful guests to read. The text clearly stated payer name Sarah Jenkins, relationship to patient daughter, total amount paid $120,000. A collective horrified gasp rippled through the crowd of federal judges and corporate lawyers. My mother let out a choked, strangled noise from the back of her throat. She dropped her crystal champagne glass. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered into 100 pieces, but nobody in the room even looked at her. That was my cue. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped out of the shadows, walking straight into the middle of the grand parlor. I was wearing my faded blue scrubs. My rubber hospital clogs squeaked slightly on the polished floor. My badge dangled proudly on my chest. I walked right past my mother, who was staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated terror. Sarah Jenkins is not a high-powered hospital executive, Chloe told the stunned crowd, gesturing toward me as I stood confidently beside her. She is the head nurse of the emergency department. She is a hard-working woman who sold her own car and worked 80-hour weeks to keep her father alive. Liam completely erased his sister's massive sacrifice because he was deeply ashamed of her profession, and he stole her credit to manipulate my sympathy. Liam was visibly shaking now. He raised his hands, stuttering wildly, desperately, trying to construct a new lie to save himself. "Chloe, wait. Please," he stammered, sweat pouring down his forehead and soaking into the collar of his custom shirt. "I can explain this. It is a massive misunderstanding. We shared the medical payments." She is just confused. Chloe did not even flinch. She simply stared at him with absolute disgust and clicked the remote again. The screen changed. The hospital bill disappeared, entirely replaced by a series of highly classified, heavily detailed banking wire transfers. The origin account was clearly labeled with Chloe and Liam's names. It was their joint wedding fund. The destination accounts were highlighted in bright yellow ink. They were offshore holding accounts belonging to predatory, high-interest lending agencies. Liam did not just lie about being a hero, Chloe stated coldly, staring directly into Liam's terrified, panicked eyes. He lied about being wealthy. My father's forensic accountants have tracked every single transaction he made. Liam is hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt from a catastrophic gambling addiction. He used the fake story about his father's medical bills to gain my absolute trust. And then he secretly stole $200,000 of my personal money to pay off underground loan sharks. The silence in the room was completely absolute. The prominent legal figures in the crowd were staring at Liam with pure, unfiltered disgust. He was no longer a charming, sophisticated groom. He was a trapped, desperate criminal caught dead to rights. Liam opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He looked desperately at my father, silently begging for help, but my father was staring blankly at his own shoes, looking completely broken and utterly ashamed. Then Chloe delivered the final, most devastating blow of the afternoon. She clicked the remote one last time. The screen displayed the official public property records for the Jenkins family home. The second mortgage documents were displayed in massive, undeniable font. "My fiancé did not act alone," Chloe announced to the horrified guests, her voice ringing with absolute authority. His parents knew absolutely everything. Patricia and Richard Jenkins secretly mortgaged their only home to fund Liam's gambling addiction. They are currently facing imminent foreclosure. They actively colluded with their son to deceive my family, hoping to use my wealth to save themselves from homelessness. They used their daughter Sarah as a scapegoat, and they deliberately banned her from attending family events, so she could not expose their massive financial fraud. My mother completely lost her mind. The pristine, elegant high society facade she had meticulously maintained for months shattered entirely into pieces. She stepped forward, her face contorted in a dark mask of absolute furious panic. She pointed a trembling accusatory finger directly at my face. "Lies!" My mother screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice shrill, frantic, and echoing painfully in the large room. "These are all disgusting lies. She is making all of this up. Sarah hacked the hospital system. She forged those documents because she is insanely jealous of her brother. She has always been jealous of Liam. She is a bitter, lonely girl trying to ruin our beautiful family. You cannot believe a single word this horrible girl says. She is committing slander against us. She is a liar." I stood perfectly still in my blue scrubs. I did not raise my voice to match hers. I did not cry. I simply looked at the woman who brought me into this world, watching her desperately try to claw her way out of a deep grave she had dug with her own 2 hands. The wealthy guests were actively backing away from my mother, as if she were carrying a highly contagious disease. A federal judge standing near the front row shook his head in pure, unconcealed disgust. Mr. Sterling stepped forward again, standing protectively next to Chloe and me. He looked at my mother with the kind of cold, calculated fury that billionaires reserve for their absolute worst enemies, and the room waited for the final brutal consequence to drop. The silence that fell over the grand parlor of the Sterling estate was not just quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating weight that pressed down on every single person in the room. The echoes of my mother's frantic, hysterical screaming faded into the high vaulted ceilings, leaving behind a profound and absolute stillness. The wealthy guests, the federal judges, the corporate attorneys, and the real estate tycoons all stood completely frozen in place. They were looking at my mother as if she had just lost her mind. The pristine, elegant high society facade she had meticulously maintained for months had shattered entirely, leaving nothing but the raw, ugly truth of her desperation exposed for the entire world to see. My mother stood in the center of the room, her chest heaving, her brand new Chanel blazer looking completely absurd against the reality of her monstrous lies. She had tried to claim that I was a bitter, jealous girl. She had tried to claim that I hacked the hospital system and forged the documents. But nobody in the room believed a single word she said. The forensic accounting evidence displayed on the massive projector screen was undeniable. The truth was carved in stone, and there was absolutely nowhere left for her to run. Mr. Sterling stepped forward from the crowd. He was a man who commanded billion-dollar boardrooms, and he did not tolerate thieves in his home. He positioned himself between Chloe and my mother, acting as a physical shield against my family's toxic manipulation. His face was entirely devoid of emotion. He looked down at Liam, who was currently trembling on the expensive Persian rug, sweating through his custom-tailored Italian suit. "Do not ever insult the intelligence of my family again," Mr. Sterling said. His voice was low, perfectly calm, and more terrifying than any shouting I had ever heard in my entire life. "You came into my home. You sat at my dining table. You looked my daughter in the eye and you lied to her face. You manipulated her empathy. You used the very real suffering of your own father to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from my child to cover your pathetic, unregulated gambling debts. You thought because we were wealthy we would not notice. You thought because we were generous we were foolish. You were entirely wrong." Liam opened his mouth desperately, trying to formulate another excuse, but his voice completely failed him. He looked like a cornered animal. He looked toward the heavy oak doors, calculating his chances of running away, just as he had done at the hotel ballroom. But Mr. Sterling had already anticipated every single move. "You will not be walking out of those doors on your own tonight," Mr. Sterling declared coldly. "Our legal team has already spent the past 48 hours compiling every single piece of evidence. Every bank transfer, every fake document, every offshore wire you sent. Our lawyer has filed a formal lawsuit against you for grand larceny, wire fraud, and severe misappropriation of property. And because the sum you stole exceeds $250,000, this is no longer just a civil matter. The entire file has been formally submitted to the police." My mother let out a sharp, breathless gasp. She stumbled backward, dropping her expensive Prada handbag onto the floor. Liam physically collapsed. His knees buckled entirely, and he dropped onto the hardwood floor, sobbing openly and covering his face with his shaking hands. The golden child, the brilliant financial savior of the Jenkins family, was completely ruined. Right on cue, heavy footsteps echoed in the marble hallway outside the grand parlor. The heavy oak doors swung open. 4 uniformed police officers stepped into the room. They looked around the opulent space, their eyes quickly locating Mr. Sterling, who gave them a single concise nod. 2 of the officers walked directly toward Liam. "Liam Jenkins," one of the officers said, his voice loud and authoritative. "Please stand up and place your hands behind your back. You are being placed under arrest for grand larceny and multiple counts of wire fraud." Liam did not have the strength to stand up. The officers had to reach down, grab him by the arms of his expensive suit, and haul him to his feet. The sharp metallic click of the steel handcuffs echoing in the silent parlor was the most definitive sound I had ever heard. The physical reality of those cuffs snapping shut around his wrists completely shattered the final remnants of the Jenkins family illusion. My brother, the man who had mocked my hospital scrubs, the man who had been ashamed of my hard work, was now wearing silver handcuffs in front of the most powerful people in the city. No! My mother shrieked suddenly, launching herself forward. She reached out and tried to grab the police officer's arms, her face completely twisted in pure agony. You cannot take him. He is a good boy. He is getting married. He made a mistake. It is just money. We will pay it back. Please, I am begging you, do not take my son. The officer stepped back smoothly, creating a firm professional barrier. Ma'am, please step away, the leading officer warned her sternly. If you interfere with this arrest, you will be joining him in the back of the squad car. Do you understand? My mother froze. Her self-preservation instincts finally overrode her panic. She stood there completely helpless as the police officers turned Liam around and began marching him out of the grand parlor. Liam looked over his shoulder as he was being led away. He looked at Mr. Sterling. He looked at Chloe, who simply turned her head and refused to meet his eyes. And finally, he looked at me. There was no arrogance left in his expression. There was only pure, unadulterated fear. The heavy doors closed behind them, and my brother was officially gone. The room remained completely silent for a very long moment. The wealthy guests slowly began to shift, murmuring quietly to one another. The show was over. The justice they had come to witness had been fully served. Then slowly my mother turned around to face me. The furious, hateful monster who had screamed slander just 10 minutes ago was entirely gone. In her place was a broken, desperate woman who had just watched her entire world burn to ash. Her golden son was in a police car. Her home was actively facing foreclosure. Her high society dreams were completely destroyed. She looked at me, and her eyes filled with frantic, manic tears. She took a step toward me, reaching out with trembling hands. Sarah. My mother wept, her voice cracking as she pleaded with me. Sarah, please. You have to help us. You are his sister. You have to talk to Mr. Sterling. Tell them to drop the charges. Tell them Liam was just confused. You can fix this, Sarah. You have savings, do you not? You are a head nurse. You make good money. You can use your savings to hire a good lawyer for your brother. You can help us pay back the money he took. Please, Sarah, you have to save your brother. I stood perfectly still in my faded blue hospital scrubs. I looked at this woman, this complete stranger who had given birth to me. The sheer, staggering audacity of her request was almost hard to comprehend. After banishing me to the shadows, after mocking my career, after secretly mortgaging her house to fund my brother's greed, and after happily participating in a plot to forge my medical records, she actually expected me to empty my own bank account to save him. She still saw me as nothing more than a convenient resource to be used whenever her precious son was in trouble. I slowly turned my head and looked at my father. He was standing near the fireplace. He had not said a single word the entire afternoon. He had watched his son steal. He had watched his wife plot. He had watched me get thrown out of their lives like garbage. He had accepted the benefit of my 80-hour work weeks without ever saying thank you. He was a weak, silent accomplice to every single cruelty I had ever endured. The hollow ache in my chest that had plagued me for my entire life was completely gone. The pain of rejection had entirely evaporated. In its place was a profound, crystal-clear reason. I saw them for exactly who they were. They were not a family. They were a sinking ship, and they were desperately trying to tie an anchor around my neck so I would drown right alongside them. I did not raise my voice. I did not scream. I looked straight into my mother's tear-filled eyes, and then I looked straight into my father's defeated face. I spoke clearly, enunciating every single word so they would ring in their ears for the rest of their miserable lives. You used to say my work brought shame upon you, I said, my voice steady and echoing in the quiet parlor. You told me my uniform was an embarrassment. You banned me from your parties because you thought I was not good enough for this world. But today, it is your hypocrisy and your absolute greed that are permanently tarnishing the Jenkins name. My mother opened her mouth, a fresh sob tearing at her throat, but I raised my hand and stopped her completely. You stole from innocent people. I continued, my tone dropping into absolute steel. You lied to everyone. You used my sacrifice, my hard work, and my literal sweat to cover up your criminal fraud. You never loved me. You only loved what you could extract from me. Sarah, please. My father finally choked out, his voice hoarse and broken. We are your family. I looked at him one last time. No, I said softly, delivering the final unbreakable truth. From this moment on, I am no longer your child. I did not wait for their response. I did not care if they cried. I did not care if they begged. I simply turned my back on them. I walked toward the heavy oak doors of the grand parlor. As I passed Chloe, she reached out and gently squeezed my arm. It was a gesture of profound mutual respect between two women who had just taken their own lives back from the exact same monsters. I nodded to her, and then I nodded to Mr. Sterling, who offered me a genuine smile of approval. I walked out of the parlor and down the long carpeted hallway of the grand estate. Behind me, I could hear the sound of my mother collapsing onto the floor, wailing in absolute despair as the guests quietly filtered out of the room, leaving my parents completely alone with the wreckage of their own making. I pushed open the back doors and stepped out into the bright afternoon sunlight. The air felt incredibly crisp and clean. I walked past the massive gardens and made my way to my 10-year-old car parked behind the guest house. I unlocked the door, slid into the driver's seat, and put my hands on the steering wheel. I let out a long, deep breath. The massive weight that I had carried on my shoulders for nearly 3 decades was completely lifted. I drove away from the North Shore estate, leaving the Jenkins family behind me forever. I was driving back to my quiet apartment, back to my demanding emergency room shifts, and back to a life that belonged entirely to me. I had protected my peace. I had demanded my own justice. I had set a boundary made of absolute iron, and I was finally truly free. If you have made it to the end of this story, I want to leave you with one very important lesson. Blood does not automatically entitle anyone to your peace, your money, or your sanity. Love is supposed to be unconditional, but access to your life must absolutely be earned with respect and honesty. You do not owe your loyalty to toxic people who only use you when it is convenient for them. You have every right to walk away from tables where respect is no longer being served. You are strong enough to build your own life. Thank you so much for listening to my journey today. If this story resonated with you, or if you have ever had to set a difficult boundary with your own family, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one. I would also love to know where my story is reaching you. Please drop a comment below, letting me know what city or country you are watching from and what time it is there right now. Your interactions help these stories reach the people who need to hear them the most. Take care of yourselves, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next video. 6 months have passed since the heavy oak doors of the Sterling estate closed behind me. Time has a remarkable way of clarifying the truth. When you are no longer drowning in the daily chaos of toxic manipulation, you finally have the chance to breathe deeply and see the world as it actually is. I walked into the hospital this morning and clipped a brand new badge to my medical scrubs. The bold black letters no longer say head nurse. They say Director of Emergency Medical Services. It is a massive promotion that I earned through years of grueling shifts, skipped holidays, and unrelenting dedication to my patients. But this time, when the hospital administration handed me that new title and a significantly larger salary, I did not have a single passing thought about how my mother would react. I did not wonder if this achievement would finally be enough to make my father proud of me. I did not try to imagine how I could leverage my success to buy their affection. I simply looked at the badge, took a deep breath, and felt pure, quiet pride in myself. The hospital is my domain, and I no longer have to hide my career to protect anyone's fragile ego. Let us talk about Liam. The golden child did not receive a golden parachute. The forensic financial evidence that Chloe and her father gathered was absolutely insurmountable. The Sterling family legal team handed the entire web of fraudulent transactions over to the district attorney, and the criminal justice system moved with a swift, merciless precision that Liam was entirely unprepared for. Liam was formally charged with multiple felony counts of wire fraud, grand larceny, and financial exploitation. He tried to hire a sleazy defense attorney to arrange a plea bargain, hoping he could manipulate the prosecutor with tears and a fake sob story about being overwhelmed by medical debt. But the prosecutor already had the certified hospital bills, proving I was the one who paid for our father's surgery. Liam had absolutely no defense. During the final sentencing hearing, I sat quietly in the very back row of the courtroom. Liam stood before the federal judge, wearing a drab, ill-fitting county jail uniform. His custom-tailored Italian suits were gone. His expensive watch was gone. His arrogant, superior smirk was completely erased from his face. The judge did not care about his high society aspirations. The judge cared about the hundreds of thousands of dollars he stole and the predatory, violent loan sharks he had engaged with to fund his reckless gambling addiction. The gavel came down with a heavy thud. Liam was sentenced to a lengthy term in a federal correctional facility. When the bailiff grabbed his arms to escort him out of the courtroom, Liam looked back at the gallery. His eyes searched desperately for our parents, but they were nowhere to be found. My parents are currently living a reality they once considered a fate far worse than death. The second mortgage they secretly took out to fund Liam's gambling addiction defaulted almost immediately after the tea party. Without the Sterling family wealth to bail them out, the bank moved forward with a rapid, aggressive foreclosure process. They lost the beautiful, sprawling suburban home where they had hosted their lavish dinner parties for decades. They lost the perfectly manicured driveway where Liam used to park his least luxury cars. The bank seized absolutely everything to cover the catastrophic debt my mother and father had willingly taken on. When the county sheriff arrived to oversee the eviction, my parents were forced to pack whatever belongings they could fit into a rented moving truck and drive away from their privileged life forever. Last I heard from a distant cousin who still keeps track of family gossip, my parents had to move into a cramped, severely dilapidated one-bedroom apartment on the extreme industrial outskirts of the city. They are surviving entirely on meager Social Security checks and basic state welfare benefits. My mother, the woman who had happily charged designer clothes and expensive handbags to a high-interest credit card just a few months ago to impress billionaires, is now actively counting pennies to buy generic groceries at the discount store. She has to sit in that crumbling apartment every single day and face the brutal, unavoidable reality that her absolute favorite child, the golden son she worshipped and protected at all costs, was the exact person who completely destroyed her life. I do not drive by their new apartment complex. I do not send them money. I do not answer their blocked phone calls. I do not feel a single ounce of guilt for leaving them behind. They place their entire bet on a cruel, manipulative lie, and the house always wins. Chloe and I, on the other hand, built something incredibly beautiful and resilient out of the wreckage. We did not just shake hands and part ways after the truth was exposed. We became fiercely close friends. Because her father's elite legal team acted so quickly, they were able to freeze several of the offshore accounts before Liam's dangerous creditors could drain the funds completely. After navigating a complex legal process, Chloe successfully recovered the vast majority of her stolen wedding fund. But instead of taking that money and planning another lavish high society event with a different man, she took that money and invested it entirely in herself. She launched her own independent financial consulting firm. Her company is specifically designed to help young women protect their personal assets, establish firm financial boundaries, and recognize the subtle, dangerous signs of financial and emotional abuse before entering into a marriage. She is thriving. We meet for coffee every other Sunday morning at a small bakery near the hospital. She does not wear ruined silk gowns anymore, and I do not have to apologize for wearing my medical scrubs. We sit across the table from each other and share our successes. We are two strong, independent women who stared down the absolute worst kind of betrayal, faced the monsters in our lives, and walked away completely whole. My daily life is remarkably peaceful now. I still live in the same cozy apartment, but the entire atmosphere of my home feels remarkably different. The air is so much lighter. The heavy, suffocating weight I carried in my chest for nearly 3 decades has completely vanished. For my entire life, I sincerely believed that family was an unbreakable sacred contract. I thought that no matter how much my parents hurt me, ignored me, or used me, I was morally obligated to stay and endure their emotional abuse simply because we shared the exact same blood. I thought my personal value was directly tied to how much suffering I could absorb without ever complaining. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I paid off enough of their massive debts, if I sacrificed my own happiness to keep them comfortable, they would eventually wake up, realize my worth, and finally love me the way a family should. I was entirely wrong, and realizing that was the greatest gift I've ever received. I realize now that I never needed their validation to be a complete person. I did not need to compromise my own deep self-respect in order to maintain a distorted, highly toxic version of family love. True love does not demand that you set your own life on fire just to keep someone else warm. True love does not ask you to hide your professional accomplishments, so a lying sibling can shine in the spotlight. True love certainly does not plot to forge legal medical documents to cover up a devastating financial crime. I wake up every single morning in my quiet, safe bedroom. I make a fresh pot of coffee. I sit by my window and I watch the sunrise paint the city skyline in beautiful shades of gold and pink. I am no longer waiting for the other shoe to drop. I am no longer waiting for a demanding, hysterical phone call asking me to fix a crisis I did not create. I am no longer erasing myself to make room for their massive egos. My heart is no longer heavy with the burden of unrequited familial love. I am simply living my life on my own terms. I am successful. I am deeply valued by the people who actually matter. And for the very first time since I was a little girl, I am completely, unapologetically free. Family is supposed to be sacred. It is supposed to be the safe, loving harbor we run to when the rest of the world turns dark and difficult. But absolutely no one has the right to use the words family love to erode your value and drain your personal efforts. No one gets a free pass to continuously exploit your kindness, steal your resources, or demean your character just because they happen to share your last name. We are conditioned from a very young age by society to believe that we must always forgive and forget, that we must turn the other cheek, and that we must always be the bigger person when it comes to our blood relatives. We are told that abandoning family is the ultimate sin. But sometimes, being the bigger person actually means packing your bags and walking away from the table. Sometimes bravely turning your back on toxic relatives is the exact and only way to save yourself from drowning in their endless chaos. It takes an incredible, monumental amount of inner strength to look directly at the people who raised you, the people who are supposed to protect you, and finally say that enough is enough. It is terrifying to sever those deeply ingrained ties, but the very moment you do, you take your entire life back into your own capable hands. You immediately open the door to lasting peace, to genuine respect, and to the kind of healthy, supportive love that does not come attached to a heavy, crushing price tag. You realize that your worth was never determined by their inability to see it. If my story today touches your heart in any way, or if you have also experienced this kind of deep injustice and manipulation in your own home, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to help spread this message of power and resilience to others who desperately need to hear it. It is so incredibly important that we share these difficult experiences out loud so that no one out there ever has to feel like they are entirely alone in their private struggles. Please do not forget to leave a comment down below, letting me know exactly which state you are watching this video in and at what time you are tuning in to listen. Your continued support, your wonderful comments, and your bravely shared stories are my absolute greatest motivation to continue sharing these journeys of healing and justice with all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. Please always remember your absolute worth, protect your hard-earned peace fiercely, and live your beautiful life proudly.